Welcome to another Thursday and another episode of the Mattriarchy. I am Rhys, coming to you from snowbound Scottsbluff, Nebraska. We are in the middle of a blizzard on the first day of spring here, and I was just driving through the wastes in my little automobile to make it to the show here. I'm really excited. We have it's up in the chat. Ezra popped in here. Sorry, Six, but I got to read this quick. He said, listening to Gwar Ragnarok while I wait and cook, which is hilarious. Talking about our
I really dig Ezra. He has a very eclectic taste, you know.
Oh man. Well, and talking about Ragnarok in the middle of the snow wasteland, I was just joking about what makes me laugh. Anyway, for the reals, we've got a unofficial Doug, or quasi-official or totally official 6-scale combat, who is here today.
No, it's official. I was in a Doug TenNapel stream a couple of weeks ago, and he officially made me a Doug. So okay. I am Doug 1. I'm part of the trifecta of people you're supposedly not to talk to. And I was hoping you would kind of explain this, Matt. What was that all about?
Oh, it's one of those things, and I was made a joke about it on Twitter just now. But man, there are certain figures out there on the Twit sphere that when you start talking to them, certain people get really up in arms about it. And you know, I know you had that. You were supposed to have a debate, a conversation about the nature of independent comics.
Yeah.
With a certain individual, and he backed out because somebody called him a punk, and he's like, "You're right. I am a little punk. I guess I'll just go back to my corner and cry."
Well, actually, I've sort of analyzed that situation a little bit because, I thought it was in earnest. You know, I thought it was an earnest opening of a dialogue. And again, I'll talk to anyone who's a little bit reasonable and doesn't fall into let's say the trappings of the drama carousel. But then, of course, the known villains made all these accusations. And the guy who wanted to host the podcast, he said, "Yeah, you're controversial." Well, I don't know, man. That's just a little weird, you know. If having an opinion is controversial these days, then okay, yeah, sure. I guess.
And that was part of the reason. That was part of my little joke to myself on my announcement. There is that, you know, I think that it's silly to decide that a person is controversial just because they have an opinion.
Well, I have to be honest with you. I didn't. So they made some allegations, and I didn't want to be in a position where I had to sort of defend my positions or defend or whatever. You know, I'm open for dialogue, but I'm not into this. It's not a court. It's Twitter, YouTube court. I'm not going to partake in that. You know, and so thanks, but no thanks. I'm not going to do that.
And I think it's one of those things too, where even these attempts where I think people say that we have to go out there and, you know, we have to find middle ground and we have to, find a way to agree to disagree. I think even some of that language is language that is there to muddy the issue and to play with the idea that there are equal sides in a debate, because sometimes there's not. Sometimes there's the truth.
There's one side that uses arguments and valid points, and there's another side that uses defamation and mudslinging and not every
tactics. Yeah, and not every debate has two sides. Sometimes there's the truth, and then there's the narrative. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's true.
And I think that, you know, like sometimes it's like no, this is, and sometimes there's opinion. Like I got the other day I was talking to somebody and I mentioned that I think that the Killing Joke, Alan Moore's The Killing Joke is garbage.
Controversial. Like, that's controversial right there.
This fellow says, no, it's really, really great. And I was like, no, I used to think it was great. And here's the reasons I changed my mind. And then he didn't have anything else to say to me about it. But that's an opinion, right? Because when it comes down to it, the things that I feel are meaningful, the things that the truths that I derive import from are not necessarily the same truths that other people do. And
that's true.
And so I think with The Killing Joke that I believe there's only one character. I think everyone else is a cipher, and the plot is only there to demonstrate and make you feel sorry for the Joker. And everything else is just in service of that goal. It's
Yeah.
not really a story with characters, and that's why I don't think it's very good. But when I was 21, it was mind blowing because the idea that you could feel sorry for the Joker wasn't something that I'd comprehended. But the story detracts the humanity from everyone else to do that.
Well, it was an interesting concept, and I have to say, I was never that much into DC characters. I've only, as of late, been starting to explore, let's say, the older storylines and all that. But yeah, I think it was well written. I like the art, and
Yeah.
But again, opinions are opinions,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not entering conversations and discussions to sort of preach my point of view. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, and that's it.
Yeah, and I agree, and especially when we're talking about if we're arguing about facts, right?
Well, it's a matter of taste. It's
Mhm.
it's a matter of taste, and
Right.
you know
And
what to say.
it's like one thing
Sorry,
that
go ahead.
I think is really funny. This is totally off subject of this half of this hour's conversation. Um, but one of the things that I think is just really funny is that like people will argue that Doug TenNapel is anti this or anti that, right? Especially in terms of like the gay marriage question. But
Yeah,
he's
but
clearly stated that it's not merit, it's not the gay that's the problem, it's the definition of it. He wholly rejects the worldview that accepts that equals marriage. He says marriage is something different and this doesn't fit the criteria. So, like it or not, these things don't mash up. They're different things.
well, I don't see how it's relevant to something like comics unless the story or a series of stories is about this subject. And
Yeah.
I'm not here to defend Doug by any means.
Mhm.
In this particular point, I have a different point of view.
Right.
But at least he's consistent, and he's taken a stand for his beliefs, and also he treats everybody as human beings. So yeah, he can say he's against something or
Mhm.
against someone, but then on the other hand, he helps out everybody regardless of what their preferences are. So I don't really see what the problem is.
Right. And
Well,
what the argument really comes to from that perspective is one that people disagree about the shape of the world, right?
yeah,
And so there is a right answer in that question, right? That's not just an opinion question, but your where you side on the facts and which set of evidence you think best reveals the shape of the world. It doesn't change the fact you can treat people with kindness and generousness and
exactly.
goodness and all that kind of stuff. And like you said, I think Doug is a guy, and I think at the same time, I've seen you disagree with people, and you seem perfectly cordial and human to people you disagree with.
Exactly.
Sometimes you get a little salty with the language, but that's okay for me. And that's just one of those things that I think sometimes people don't pick up on, is that you can love somebody and passionately disagree with their opinions
Yeah, of
or
course. Yeah.
the things that they believe are facts even.
Well, see, this is the kind of the era we live in now. The Twitter age, the YouTube age, everything's being weaponized. And listen, you can't really understand what somebody's like just by reading a couple of DMs or reading a couple of comments. You know what I mean? This would take actually a real genuine discussion with someone to really get to the core of what their beliefs are. So to just judge someone on the basis of a couple of comments, yeah, it just doesn't work that way. And listen, yeah, like I said, it's being weaponized, it's being used as ammo, it's being used for monetary gains by certain factions, again, on both sides of the political spectrum. And yeah, that's just something we're going to have to deal with.
So
And
here's a
my
question.
response is,
Okay.
I'm not going to shut up for anyone. And I might say some stupid things here and there, but I might say some valid things as well. And yeah, that's just it. You decide what you do with it. It's not really my problem.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think when it comes to that, when it comes to all debates, I think one of the most important things that is to look, because like there's sometimes, like I said, sometimes there's a right side and a wrong side, and I think you can tell who's the right side and the wrong side sometimes by who wants to keep talking and who wants to shut other people up,
Well,
right?
you made a good point before. Like in the '90s, I think we were heading in the right way. Everybody sort of there was sort of a cross pollination of influences, and everybody was listening to everybody, and there was a general consensus of what was good and what was bad.
Mm-hmm.
But in Hong Kong clown world, now everything's been turned upside down, and everybody's being pitched against each other, and people are falling for it. And even people that are supposed to be, let's say, on the similar ideological sides, they also fall for this pitfall, And yeah, everybody's being played, and it's a shame. It's a real shame.
Yeah, and I think part of that comes down to, I think we're miseducated about how thinking works, and I don't think we're as a world culture, because I think we have to. While I'm hugely proudly an American, we also, obviously we're having this conversation across borders. Yeah. So as a world, as a Western culture, I think we've been diluted from understanding the process of thinking through things and rationalizing things and understanding how facts work. And so I think we miss out sometimes on all of that.
Well, I think what's going on in general in the West is sort of a cultural apathy. And I think we're being led by sort of this gang of, on the one side, cultural nihilists, and on the other side, of people who just go for the dollar. And, anything earnest is sort of thrown out with the bathwater, And of course, this is a very black and white picture that I paint, but I think that's in fact what's going on.
Well, and I think one of the things is, like, you're looking at it being black and white, even people that are in the middle of it, right, that don't necessarily have sinister motives, sometimes get pulled around in that direction because they don't see the argument as a such, right? They don't see what it is. It's like there's a difference between niceness and kindness, right? Yeah. So niceness is not wanting to hurt anyone's feelings, right? Kindness is not wanting harm to come to anyone.
Yeah.
So when you're a parent, as I am, sometimes you have to thump your kid's hand to keep him from sticking his hands into something that will destroy them.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So you forego niceness for the larger picture of kindness, right? For the larger thing is, I don't want you harmed, so I'm going to inflict a minor discomfort on you to keep you from doing the thing that will hurt you and damage you long term. I'm going to take away your phone so that you don't, call up, somebody who's going to cause you injury, or
so you don't plug your headphone into the electrical sockets, Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Especially with very little ones. You're, like, my wife used to say that boys under 5 are set on self-destruct, and it's a parent's job to keep them from following through on those SOP.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, this is an interesting point you make. So if you sort of draw a parallel about what's going on with comics and with IPs, how do you fit that puzzle piece into the mix? That's like my question to you.
How do comics fit into all of that?
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I think comics are like all media, right? They're like all stories. And so I think that they can reflect the truth of the world, or they can reflect the niceness, the story that makes people feel good about the world.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's one of those things that comes to, and it's like, let me try to think of a very uncomfortable truth.
Well, okay. let me specify the question.
Okay,
do you believe that comics and movies and this sort of stuff, is there a task of education, of education?
Oh, I wouldn't say so. No, I think okay, so I have sort of weird views about this, right?
Yeah.
Like, learning isn't something that teachers make happen. It's not something that schools make happen. It's something that happens on the inside of the student.
Yes.
Right? So all that teachers do is present the information.
Yeah.
All storytellers do is present the information. And I think it's the storyteller's job and the teacher's job to make that information accurate and impactful.
Okay, that would be my second question. Should the information given, certain story narrative, should it contain factual, yeah.
Okay, facts. So I'm actually going to go a step beyond the factual question, and I think it needs to be true. Okay, and I'm going to steal a line from Neil Gaiman in his the Sandman book. Just because something didn't happen doesn't mean it's not true, right?
Okay.
And I think the storyteller, whether he's telling fiction or he's telling historical narrative or whatever, needs to speak to, needs to build a world that reflects the truth of the universe in which we live, not necessarily in its factual amount, but in its impactful amount.
Okay, so that's sort of like a philosophical
Exactly.
Perspective.
Exactly.
Well, I have to say I agree with you, but I also have to say one of my pet peeves is revisionist history.
Yes.
So I think this is very dangerous. And like you said, if you're going to give your truth, you have to state that it's your truth.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to say something as a fact, then you better damn well be able to back up those facts. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what I was driving at with those with my question, because I see a lot of revisionism going on, not just in the storytelling, but with the entire industry. Narratives are flip flopping.
No, and I think there's a difference between, okay, if you're telling an alternate history, like Captain America fighting against the Nazis in World War II, right? That's an alternate history, and everybody knows that's an alternate history because there's no Captain America, right? But if you're talking about, if you're telling the story of the Battle of Darwin, it needs to end the same as it did in the real world, right? Yes. Or you're specifically telling an alternate history with flying people and aliens or whatever else you want to do with it. I think it's an important thing. It's one thing to play with the narrative, the historical narrative, to get people kind of the feel for it. But if you're actually changing the real history, which is one of the few problems that I had with the Wonder Woman movie, is that the villain, German fellow, was a mover and shaker in World War II, but he was dead at the end of Wonder Woman that was in World War I. That's an immersion breaking element if you know your World War I history at all.
But so isn't that just bad writing?
Well,
that just the Kurtzman school of writing, so to speak.
Okay, sure.
No, but I get what you mean, man. I get what you mean.
That's one of those things where, because there are obviously, because part of the thing is DC, the movies are not going to bother to tell you why the world is different because that dude's dead, right? Yeah. In a long form comic format, sometimes you can play with that kind of stuff. Or if you're telling a novel, you could say, "Oh, here's how things are different because he's dead," and you can kind of demonstrate that kind of stuff. But in a movie, it's just 2-hour segments of this, and everything else you're left to fill in the blanks of. So, that's
talking about that sort of narratives. What did you think about the whole Captain America being a secret Hydra agent?
Oh man, it's terrible! It's terrible.
Because that's intentional. That's intentional.
Oh, of course it is. Of course it is. But here's my problem with Captain America being a secret Nazi, right? Is that it undergirds all of his patriotic speeches, everything he stood for in the Marvel universe from the 40s on, as being a lie, as being false, right? So Captain America, who is the moral center of the Marvel universe, right? The symbol of everything that's great about the Marvel universe becomes just a lie. And so then, but the general morality of the Marvel universe was the same as the general morality of America itself, right? So because Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, these guys were veterans. These guys, they served their country. They love their country. Tony Sissel says, "Don't get him started on Nazis." Apparently, Tony's watched my show some.
I've got a special segment coming up regarding this. So, now, but I guess the bottom line is, again, it's a deconstructionalism.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And if it's done, let's say, if it's done from an aesthetic point of view, that's fine. But when it's done from a cultural point of view, then you're traversing some really muddy waters,
and there's a difference between a world where this is like a fictional world, like Superman Red Sun, right? What if Superman was raised by the communists? But that's not the mainline universe, right? When you're saying, oh, the mainline universe is this way, we're not taking a tangent, we're not explaining some alternate thing that we can just say, oh, that universe ended, now let's go back to real Cap. No, they have to go back to fake Cap, pretending he's real Cap, being written by Mark Waid, who hates Trump. And it was so blatant and it was so obvious. It was so stomach churningly awful. I just couldn't stand it. I quit buying it.
So, listen, another thing that's sort of topical regarding Marvel, that's Snowflake and Safe Space.
Oh, you mean Black Scarlet Witch and Black Quicksilver?
New Warriors, the New
Oh my
Warriors
goodness.
thing.
Yeah, that's garbage.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
What
I
are they
love how their
thinking?
teammates are Freakazoid and Hot Topic, Morbius, and Dora the Explorer. I thought that was fun.
I don't know. How long do you think they're going to keep doing this sort of stuff?
Oh, I don't know.
Until nobody reads comics anymore? Because
Well, no. See, here's part of the deal. Is they're Marvel. I have a couple feelings about this. Is that Marvel is trying to appeal to that audience, right? So, because there is an audience, they're out there watching Steven Universe. They're out there. There were huge fans. There are people that are huge fans of the subtextual, subversive diversity stuff inside of Adventure Time, right? And I say it's subversive because not because I'm trying to paint like some sort of deviance on it. That's a different question. But the way it was done was in a way that was like, oh, we're talking about this thing that we're not talking about. So that's what I meant. That the storytelling was the diversity within the storytelling was intentionally subversive. Not that it was, I'm not talking about something like that. Anyway.
Well, it's an intentional choice.
And it's certainly intentional. But there's a market for that kind of storytelling. And Adventure Time, Steven Universe, there's what's that other princess show on Nickelodeon? Anyway, demonstrate that there is a market for it. So I think Marvel's trying to get to that market. The problem that I have with it is that I'm not sure that that comics are a medium, at least in their current distribution model, that can reach that audience. That's thing one. I think two, it's too on the nose. It's a little bit old white guys trying to appeal to trying to do rap songs in the 90s. It's got a bit of that vibe to it. And I think the other thing is that
and they're destroying the lore. Everything that made these companies successful. Yeah, they're taking it down brick by brick.
And that's the other thing that's been going on since 14, at least in Marvel. It's probably been going on longer, but and actually all the way back to Civil War, if you really get down to it, it's that these new concepts are being brought in exclusion of the old stuff, right? Yeah. It's one thing if Marvel was just like, okay, so we're gonna get going to get classic Spider-Man, classic Captain America, classic Daredevil stuff, really gritty Daredevil stuff is gonna be really great, and also we're gonna do Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur for the kids. Also, we're gonna do we're gonna relaunch Spider Girl for the tweens, whatever, or re-release Spider Girl because it was already great, so why remake it? Just give DeFalco money, he earned it. Which is another thing that DC and Marvel do that I don't understand. They've got centuries of brilliant material by these giants of the industry. Why not reprint it and just take that money, give it out, take more in, give it out. You could
respect, show little respect to the pioneers. What I mean?
Yep. But anyway, my point though is that you can have your cake and eat it too. You can look for the new markets and keep the old markets, and some of those new kids will end up liking the old stuff, the old style stuff too. Yeah. I got into comics reading Uncle Scrooge Adventures, and and I was a little interested in Batman. I grew up with the stuff out there, and then so one day I'm sitting there in the store reading through my Uncle Scrooge Adventure comic. This is the one I'm going to buy, and then there was Batman sitting over there on the shelf, and I was like, ooh, that's interesting. You can come home with me too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know, man. I think it's a sign of the times. I hope, let's say, the industry at large will survive this weird cultural impasse that we're in. I think, in that regard, I'm a bit of an optimist because I think the pendulum will swing. This current wave of narratives is for this generation, but I already hear that Gen Z, they're sort of leaning more towards, let's say, traditional ideals and all this sort of stuff.
Well, and I think one of the things that you see too is like, that old cliche: if you meet a conservative who is young, he doesn't have a heart, and if you meet a leftist when he's old, he doesn't have a brain, right? I think Bill Buckley might have said that, but I might be wrong about that. But I think one of the things you have with that is Andrew Klavan says that reality gets a vote. And I think as people grow up, they see what works and what doesn't work,
pragmatism.
And
it's true.
And I think that's one of those things that, like, as people get older, they're like, well, this story I thought was like me and the Killing Joke. I thought it was really great when I was 21, but when I was 41, I was like, I have more life under my belt. I've seen my children grow half the way up. These things that are supposed to be super impactful, they're not, because I've lived them and they don't look like this, even with pancake and makeup and shotguns,
Well, and I think story-wise, these days they're throwing everything and the kitchen sink into it, and that's just gonna leave less and less of an impact, So that's a lot of stuff is just not very well written, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. And I think modern comics, not everybody. You get Robert Venditti doing awesome work.
Yeah.
I'm going to forget his name for a second, but who did Aquaman and the Silencer for DC. I can't remember his name right now.
Yeah, I'm not too much into DC.
It doesn't matter. But there are some guys that just are doing amazing work. A lot of the guys over at Alterna who were there just putting forth a really top shelf efforts on a lot of their stuff. The 12, I'm looking forward to the relaunch of that. You get the new series of a Tinseltown coming up there. David Lucari's Tinseltown, which the first issue series was great. Anyway, there's a lot of people. There are people in comics that are giving it their all, but I think a lot of your big name guys, not necessarily big name guys, the big companies, they've got bottom shelf talent there.
Yeah.
That they're either people that'll work for a little, or people that are just in the right place at the right time. They're in LA, they're in New York when they need somebody. They're friend of a friend. Oh, you used to write, a column on comics for the college newspaper. Come on over to Marvel, something like that.
I think I
might be wrong about that.
Problem. Yeah, part of the problem.
Yeah.
But I guess one of the symptoms is, the way I buy comics now is just, firstly, the art has to appeal to me. I might read a couple of pages, but it's all very sporadic. And before it was, you could buy a whole series. You knew, you knew they weren't going to do too much crazy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of when you have a winning formula, it's winning for a reason. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So my buying of comics has become very sporadic. I do buy a lot of old stuff, and some things are real gems. Fortunately, even current year stuff. So that's cool. And I think the indie comic scene is really thriving. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of really great stuff going on. So I hope people, a larger audience, will sort of get into that as well.
Well, I think so. And one of the things that we have today that we didn't have even 15 years ago, when me and the guys first started pulling together our universe, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that is available is the cost of entry is so much lower than it used to be. You used to be able, before we got into it, my friend Chris and I spent a couple of years collecting rejection letters from the big guys, right? and we had never even considered, we hadn't really considered doing self-publishing, because like back in the day, only printers they had were offset printers. You had to print a minimum of 500. You had to have the money up front for all of this stuff. And a couple of years after that, about 2006, we started doing the webcomic thing, hoping we could build up enough of a company, up of a following to kind of move on with that. We started looking into it, and digital press was a thing, and print on demand became a thing. And those minimum orders went from 500 down to 200, and then from 200 down to 50. And so we're like, oh,
Yeah,
suddenly we can afford to print enough to take to a con or to take to
exactly.
our local comic shop or a local bookstore and say, please put these on your shelf. And so that's what we did.
Well,
So,
I think I understand what you mean with the advent of all this new technology, all these new platforms. This should be a booming age for comics, in fact,
mm,
you know. But yeah, I guess maybe there's so much other media that people get into, and especially a certain age brackets get into, you know,
yep.
like the games and whatever. That yeah, I guess we're sort of becoming a niche, sort of a boutique, boutique enthusiasm.
Well, and I think
Um,
part of it is I think that the barrier to entry is low, and comic culture is huge, but there's a we still have to find a way to find the market, right?
yeah,
I think the kids and the young adults who want to read comics are out there. Some of them, that there, and there's of course web comics are a big thing, so a lot of people can read it for free. But I think a lot of it's about finding the way to get it to market. And with print comics, part of the things we have here is ever since 2005, it's been an exclusive diamond run
yeah. That's
operation.
one thing I wanted to talk to you about because I think part of the problem is this whole distribution
Mhm.
process, you know, and it's true. But sorry, expand.
Well, no, I mean, think about it. Like before that, before 2005, Marvel didn't have an exclusive contract, or DC didn't have an exclusive contract with distribution, right?
Yeah,
And from the 70s up, well, probably even maybe in the late 60s, up through the 80s and 90s, there was a competitive distribution system.
yeah.
People like Charlton had gone in there and had wheedled their way into the industry, and they kind of overextended themselves and worked themselves out. But with that, it was a situation where there was a competition for distribution, and so people were working with small town newsprint distribution
Yeah,
services and magazine distributors and everything else, and these smaller distributors would actually like they'd have like basically an auction. They'd do bids on who would buy this
yeah.
bulk of comics from Marvel, from DC, from Image for the lowest price, and
Well,
they'd
but that's the
negotiate
thing.
that with their
I
production.
remember comics were everywhere. You could literally buy them everywhere. You know what I mean? And now, yeah, as the comic shops are slowly closing down,
Yep.
of course,
Well, and
the whole Corona pandemic is going to have a huge impact
yeah.
on that industry as well.
And
But
so I
yeah,
think one
I
of the
don't.
things we have is if we can find a way to get direct to consumer prices down, I think that's going to be a big factor in all of that. And maybe finding a way of bundling them or using
Yeah.
a polycentric distribution model for them.
Well, I've been talking to Doug number three, your later guest, about the whole bundling concept, and I think that's cool. And I hope it's going to be sort of again a cross pollination of different sort of publishing guys, you know, because yeah, I think we're all sort of in the same boat, and most of us are kind of on the same frequency of what we're
Mm.
doing. So there's no reason, yeah, to do sort of these sample packages to at least get some books out there, spread these stories, spread these characters, and then take it from there. So
Yeah, and I mean, not to get too much in the biz on that, but I think like a lot of us who are stateside end up going to conventions through the year, and if we had a situation where we were sharing each other's issues
yeah,
out, we could have a lot better way of spreading, because like we can afford to go to maybe 2 cons a year, right?
yeah.
And one of them just got canceled, so
Yeah, I
well,
think
actually,
this whole
it
deal
was
is
it was going
it's
to be
going to take a while, man. This is
it
going
was
to
going to be
take at
3 this
least
year,
eight
but
eight to 9 months before this whole situation is resolved,
yeah.
and then it's going to be a huge impact, even maybe years to come.
Yeah.
People are going to feel the impact of what's going on now. You know.
So, but with all of that is a situation where on a normal year, if we were having some Wicked books and some Ideal books and some Gravestone books that I was taking to Fort Collins, or I was taking to Denver, or I was taking to Cheyenne, there'd be on my table's full of books, and I can share the wealth and share my time. And then maybe also make back the money I spent on getting the table,
Exactly. Yeah.
Whereas I know with a product we sell, and it's not for everybody. And but maybe some of this other stuff might be, and figuring out
So,
some way of
what
working
are
that out.
average prices these days to get a table at a con?
Oh man, it's everywhere. It's anything from like 75 to 300 is what
Okay.
depending on the con it's at.
Oh, it's reasonable. It is
Yeah.
reasonable, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, if you're turning the if you're selling books, it definitely can be. And last year, my one of my partners, Barry, he's an artist, and he sold
yeah,
probably $150 in prints. Right? I mean, just like in like a day and a half, just.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
that was a lower one. We made our table cost back, which was like pretty awesome. So it was
Well,
good.
I hear that the trick is you should just do a Venom drawings and you know, sort of
Well,
manga, big boobs, existing characters, and that way you can make your
yeah.
money.
Well, the funny thing about that is that like he hadn't intended to. He was just doodling around with some stuff and had drawn the characters from Into the Spider-Verse,
Yeah, yeah,
and they were huge. Like we had people coming back multiple times to pick up the different prints that they'd like, nah, I'm just gonna get one. And then we'd see him a couple hours later. I'll take the other one too. And oh no, and I'll take that third one. I didn't see that third one the first time.
yeah, yeah. Okay, well, it's a good thing. I'm not putting it down. It is what it is.
It was a good day for him.
Yeah.
We we sold like probably 3 of our comics, which I felt kind of bummed about because I want to talk about my stories.
Dude, I love cons. I really love the community. I love all the different characters in it, and I wish I had a little bit more access where I'm from. But yeah, you guys were fortunate that you at least had some sort of circuit going on, and that's
Mhm.
definitely something to cherish
Yep.
for, yeah. So I hope that
So
all of that returns.
so we've been on for a half an hour and have not talked about napalm at all.
It often happens when I start rambling, yeah.
No, man, it's all good stuff, and the chat seems really engaged and everything. But I'm just like, hey, let's talk about napalm.
Yeah, let's
So
talk about Napalm, man.
tell me a little bit. Give me your elevator pitch, and of course I've heard it before, but let's do it again. What's your elevator pitch for the Napalm Brothers?
Well, we were talking about revisionist history a little bit, and yeah, I just want to state that's not sort of what I'm engaging in. But okay, sure, you have this story about a couple of Vietnam vets. There's also a purple gorilla in it, and it's set in the '70s, so you can imagine this is not sort of your gritty war story or any sort of yeah, stuff like that. But what it is, I try to sort of wrap my sort of perspective of this era, this conflict, into an engaging story that has a lot of humor in it, and it's really colorful, both in the writing and in the art. And yeah, I think these characters, I have some strong characters in there, and this arc is going somewhere. So I really hope more people will engage with the Napalm Brothers, so to speak.
So what was it that made you decide to set an era your comic in this era?
Well, I've always been fascinated with the Vietnam War, specifically the late '60s, early '70s sort of era, and a lot of my personal preferences, let's say cultural references, come from this era. I sort of was a kid in the '70s, grew up in the '80s, and yeah, I was in contact later on in life due to my occupation with some people who actually were in the Vietnam War. And I always thought it would be interesting to sort of bundle all my thoughts about this into a little story. And then, like we said, now we have all these platforms. I can actually sell my books overseas to a larger audience. So I thought would be the perfect timing to actually get going with the story. But it's been brewing for a while.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that I think is really cool too, working with Doug Garrett over at Gravestone, because I think that he's first of all he's got a proven track record, he's got the contacts, plus he just has this passion for storytelling
Yeah,
that
for sure.
it's
And listen, when I sort of talked to Doug about this first, he said, "Well, listen, if we're gonna make a profit, what do you want to do with this?" I said, "Dude, you're doing all this work. Any profit that we make, we're gonna put it into the Gravestone press coffers, and then we're just gonna try to build something." So that was sort of my input with this whole project.
very
And
cool.
yeah, Doug's been doing an amazing job promotionally. And
Mhm.
like I said, we're on the same frequency when it comes to making comics, and that's the most important thing. And he's got his thing going on with Lone Wolf, and that's very cool. And I hope that the Napalm Brothers will be sort of a reoccurring thing within the Gravestone Press platform.
Okay, cool. And that's exciting to hear that you've got further adventures looked at. I always think that's fun. I, of course, with you might not know this, but with our Ideal Comics brand, we've got centuries of history that we've mapped out.
Yeah,
So
I've been checking out your website the last week, and it's a lot of interesting stuff. Actually,
yeah, I need to. Our website looks a little sad right now. We need a lot more
yeah, you need
stuff
to
on it.
update a little bit maybe, but also
Yeah.
my VPN kind of got messed up with your website, but that's okay. I think yeah, what you're doing is it's really a great thing, man.
So yeah, we've been at it for a while, and it's a ton of fun. But I'm not a web guy, and I'm not a finance guy, and so those are the things that I'm really awful at.
No, I hear you, man, and that's sort of what we're doing now. You kind of have to know a lot about a lot of things. It's not just drawing or writing or whatever.
So
You have to-
the Napalm Brothers, they're not actually brothers, right? It's
well, there's the main characters is Paco and Cooper. They met during their tour in Nam. They had a mutual friend who, upon return to the States after the war, he got into some trouble. And this first storyline is them sort of investigating, what happened to their friend.
and the
And
story of their meeting. That's in the Charlie and the Wire, right?
well, no, actually, Charlie and the Wire. It's mostly it's about let's say the character who, yeah, the third character who's not actually in Napalm. So the guy who dies, they investigate their death. He's called
Okay.
Dwayne Brown. And yeah, this my part of the Ashcan is an 11-page story, sort of to give a character sketch of what sort of guy he was,
I
because
see.
and yeah, the main concept is sort of this camaraderie, this brotherhood of military people, of people who actually were engaged in conflicts. And yeah, you know what they say, even if you sort of leave the Marine Corps, you're always a Marine, And
Mhm.
I thought that's a great concept to sort of explore, because these people they do have a different outlook on life, Sort of interesting to combine that with yeah, all this zany stuff going on in the comic. I thought it would make a nice contrast. And also the name itself, the Napalm Brothers. I thought, okay, so what are the two worst things? What's the worst thing that came out of the Vietnam War? What's the best thing? Well, the worst thing obviously is napalm, the burning kids. But the best thing is this brotherhood, this sort of mutual generational thing. So that's why I sort of combined those two elements. And I think it's a strong brand, and they're strong characters.
And so you gave me the chance to look at the Ashcan there, Charlie and the Wire, and I tell
Yeah.
you, man, I really loved that. The whole thing was just, I mean, visually was really stunning. It's got the black and white art just sings. Did a great job with that artistically, but I think he did a really good job too of demonstrating the complexity of motivations behind people that are involved.
Well, I think writing wise, because that's what we're talking about. I sort of hate assumptions.
Mhm.
I think characters in particular, they should yeah, they make decisions based on their backstory, and yeah,
Mhm.
you don't necessarily need to spell out everything that's in that backstory. In fact, part of the fun of starting with new characters is that you sort of explore how they came to be as the series goes along. But yeah, there's some very strong key elements to these characters that I sort of portray in both the Ashcan and in the comic. So I think also I want to say that Tony Sizzle, he did a 4-page story about one of the other characters, Bongo the gorilla, and it's just amazing, man. Our sort of outlook was. Yeah, again, the 1960s underground comics like Zap, and
Mhm.
of the Robert Crumb stuff, Richard Griffin, and I think there's not a lot of stuff out there now, and I
Yeah.
really hope in the next issues we can take it up a notch. We can sort of explore even crazier stuff, because I think this day and age is dominated by a wrong think, but I want to get back to free think. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
that's really sort of our goal with this whole thing.
So I want to get back to Napalm in a second, but something you said there intrigues me because Yeah, I think you're right. I think our society as a whole is being crushed by this idea of that wrong think is a thing, right?
Yeah.
And there are two reactions to that counterculturally, right? One reaction is, no, I'm going to keep talking about the things that I think are true and why they're true, and let's have a real conversation. You get people that push forward the conversation. The other countercultural reaction is people that say, you know what, I'm just going to be offensive since you're already offended. And those
Yeah.
aren't the same, right?
Exactly.
And one of those conversations leads, to, there's still a fight, there's still animosity, there's still hatred, but one of those conversations leads to a conversation, and I think can grow truth out of it. And one conversation just makes everybody look like dicks. And
No, true. Yeah, and that's the situation that we're in mostly. You know what I mean? But
I think so. I think so. And it's just one of those things where I've witnessed this thing happen, but the way you explained that really kind of put the words in my brain about that. That's, I think, maybe part of why people believe that they're in the middle of, we're standing for freedom of speech, when no, you're really silencing people with your speech. Can you not see the difference? And they can't, because they're looking
I
at
get what you mean, but there's also a flip side to this,
Mhm.
because you were saying, about being offensive for the sake of being offensive, but everything's offensive these days. So that's sort of, yeah. And if everything's offensive, then my point of view is then anything is allowed.
Mhm.
In fact, we should, just speak your mind. Just do what you want to do.
Yep.
I support the George Carlin train of thought there. I might not agree with him, on a political level, but I do agree with his message in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, Napalm Brothers is a little bit political. It's written from my perspective, but I'm not projecting it as a solid truth. It's just my interpretation of what happened, and I think it's sort of a counter reaction to a lot of stories that I've read about the era that go in a completely different, let's say, political sphere. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think is most intriguing about it, and what I'd love to maybe spend our next. Oh man, there's only 10 minutes. Oh, but one of the things that I think about it is like, okay, so I grew up here in America, and I was basically taught through television, through news, through things my parents learned, that America had lost the Korean War, and that America had lost Vietnam, and that they were great mistakes and they were blunders, and there's even jokes about it in The Princess Bride, right? Never get involved in a land war in Asia, and all this kind of stuff. But when I grew up and I started looking at the history myself, and looking at the not what I was being taught in school, in college, because we didn't get to that when I was in college, but like just looking at it for my own sake and in curiosity, that wasn't really true, right?
Well, especially the situation in Vietnam, and let's just look at Vietnam for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
What was going on with Ho Chi Minh? Basically, Ho Chi Minh was a nationalist, and we just came out of let's say, the post-colonial era, where the French were sort of ruling. They were already losing grip after the Second World War, and then the nationalist movement, they sort of gave that final push. But his movement was sort of hijacked by the communists. It could have easily been hijacked by ultra-nationalists as well, but it was in fact hijacked by communists. And that's initially what Eisenhower in '54 sort of, they made a pact, and he sent about 700 military advisors. And of course, after that, Kennedy came into power, and Kennedy had a sort of different doctrine, Cold War-wise, where Eisenhower, he had the nuclear deterrent, and Kennedy kind of wanted to step away from that. He wanted to win these conflicts with conventional methods. He was very much into the special forces. He was a driving force behind the special forces. So he started sending over advisors en masse. And of course, it sort of escalated from that. Kennedy got assassinated. LBJ, he felt he needed to protect his manpower and resources in Vietnam. The whole stop the domino effect. And that's kind of where it became a shit show. But basically, the battles were won, but the war was lost due to lack of political will to fight the sort of war that was necessary. And this
Well,
we can
and
draw a
and it
parallel
was
to that
and it
in this
took.
day and age, because if we look at the conflicts in Afghanistan and in Iraq and in the Middle East, they're also being fought by this doctrine.
Yep.
Okay, sure, the military is now more professional, but there's still no political will, and
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things you look at like, the last part of the war when Nixon was in office, right? I know Nixon was sort of a son of a bitch, but at the same time, like, he upped the troops. They were moving forward. They were sorry, the chat's making jokes. But they were moving forward. They were actually producing a thing, and they brought the North Vietnamese to the table, and they had the whole ceasefire going. And then Watergate happened, and back in stateside, we abandoned those people.
A couple of things. It was a sort of a multitude of factors. Firstly, it was Watergate, but it was also situations like My Lai, the burning of that village. You had the napalm bombing of the kids. You had the press that was fiercely against the war, and people were just fed up. The body bags came home, the mangled boys came home, and people just said enough is enough. And this is also understandable, but this is also why the military changed their PR doctrines after Vietnam, and it also stopped the conscripts, because the main problem with morale was in fact coming from conscripts.
Well, and one of the things that, like, I guess the first thing that made me start questioning the predominant narrative on Vietnam was when I was actually first I was looking into World War I, because I was interested in writing a period piece in World War I, and I discovered that in 1917, 1 year in World War I, more people died than in the entirety of Vietnam, and Vietnam was 11 years long.
Well, listen, it's just sort of the narrative you want to run with. Listen, okay, I'm not saying colonialism is a good thing.
No.
The French, they behaved like assholes over there. Then they say, okay, American involvement was colonialism. But on the other hand, communists, they would wipe out entire villages who would be against their sort of ideological point of view. So, I'd rather personally live under the relative freedom of a democratic capitalist system than under the jackboots of the Red Banner, and at least, let people choose for themselves. But so, again, it's sort of a black and white narrative. Vietnam War bad, but this was not what was going on. Both, let's say, political factions in the United States, from the liberal and from the conservative side, they actually backed this conflict. They really wanted to sort of, with the best intentions, to go over there and change the situation.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think is one of the factors that I think, if there is a huge mistake with Vietnam, with Afghanistan, with Iraq, it's that these wars weren't one to be ended quickly. They were pinpricks. They were gradual, rather than shock and awe, blood and thunder, get it over with fast. Because when you end something quickly, there's less dying. And that's one of the things that just, I mean, like, you look at the troop surge in Iraq in the Bush years.
Yeah.
That's what brought them to the table to stop, bombing. And it wasn't flawless, but it was.
They have to give the public. They have to massage these ideas into the public's mind. But they're not saying the truth. They're not saying we're going over there to do this, and it's going to take this long, and we expect this many casualties. And all these facts, they have study groups that look at this stuff. That's not what they tell the people. So if you're going to lie to the people, then bodies start piling up. Yeah, of course, people are going to lose their faith, in the whole system.
Yeah, I think that's a real important lesson. And I think sometimes people of a nation, I remember, being here after 9/11, and when we first went into Afghanistan, I mean, of course, I live in the middle of, rural America, right? But there was maybe 4 people I talked to that didn't agree that it needed to happen.
Yeah.
Right. Now, should we still be there? That's a whole different question that I don't want to get into. But at the time, everybody agreed this has to happen and we have to be part of it. Yeah. But if we would have, I think the people might be more willing to follow up with it to see it through if they knew the cost to begin with.
That's exactly my point, And then another thing, especially in the Napalm Brothers, a point that I'm trying to make is that these guys that came back, they were treated like shit.
Yes.
They didn't get them welcome back for 20 years. And that's on society. That's not just on the politics or the high brass military. That's on society. Society did that.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be cool to place two of these pretty outspoken characters and make them sort of heroic, I mean, yeah, to me, anyone who's willing to defend their whole way of life, to me, that's a form of heroism. Are mistakes being made? Yes, but end of the day, if you don't have a military, the whole thing is going to go up in flames.
Well, it's like, there's the big question about who shot to look at this, who shot first at Lexington and Concord, right?
Yeah.
Who really started the Revolutionary War? Well, was it just self-defense? Did the British strike first, or was it an unjust action of aggression? Did the Americans start it first? Which side was it? It matters to whoever pulled the trigger.
The actual start of the Revolutionary War taxation, British taxation over the colonies. So again, a monetary reason for starting the conflict.
That was one. There was like 17 if you look at the Declaration. I don't want to get into that whole thing today, but
that's for the next
when it came to bullets flying, my point was like, it matters who pulled the trigger has a moral responsibility depending on how it went down, who pulled that first trigger.
Yeah.
But the nation, for the sake of the nations that were involved, or the birthing nation that was involved, at once bullets are flying, all bets are off the table.
True. Yeah.
So, well, man, it's just about an hour. You don't have to stick around if you don't want to. Doug TenNapel is not here yet, but I am gonna. But he's supposed to be here any minute. You're welcome to stick around as long as you want. But I know where you are at. It is ridiculous.
I'm going to listen for a little while, but I just want to say one more thing. That's not.
Oh, go for it, man. Yeah.
I know you don't do current year topics mostly, but I do want to address the coronavirus a little bit because I've been talking to a lot of people, also people who are in the medical profession, and the way the situation is being handled in different parts of the world, it's not good. I think governments kind of realized soon after Wuhan that they were ill prepared for a pandemic. And, they initially maybe thought they could get away with letting the virus burn out and, sort of secure all of the protective measures for an elite class until a vaccine becomes available. Vaccine won't be available for another 13 months at least. So don't buy into that narrative. But now they see they can't let the virus run amok. So they want to have like a selective burn to reach immunity. In some countries, they call this herd immunity. And to me, that's just, it's offensive. This whole situation is offensive, how it's being handled, and you're being lied to. Just look at the facts. First, they say, don't use masks. They don't work. Now they say, oh my God, we don't have any masks. It's a shit show. It's a shit show. Prepare for a bad situation for at least a couple of months. And stop saying it's just a flu, because it's not. It's actually a lot worse. And I really hope everybody stays safe and we can all enjoy comics in the coming years. So that's just what I wanted to say.
One of the great things about this time, though, for people that are in the cities that can't do a lot, for people that are being sent home from work, there's lots of time to make and read comics. So it's a great time to head on over to Indiegogo. Link is in the description. And throw some bread down for Napalm Brothers. It's on my list to get. I haven't yet because I'm bad at managing my time today. I was going to earlier and I just didn't get to it.
I appreciate it, man.
But that's on the list. So I am TenNapel's live on his channel. Oh, he's supposed to be here. I have to go bug him. Okay. So anyway. I just knocked my microphone.
We have about 7 days left on the Napalm campaign. I hope people haven't backed yet. They do it. It's a project of love. And I think everybody who's sort of into that sort of art style sort of knows the way I conduct myself online. They know kind of what they're going to get. So it's just a fun book.
So
Anyway, I kind of have to cut it short. I hope you're not getting into trouble stream wise if I drop out.
No, you'll be fine. If you drop out, I'll still be here. And before you go, one thing is Twitless said, "Doug, are you okay? You sound like you've got corona." So,
Corona.
so anyway, so if everybody is sick, thanks so much for coming on. It was great having you
me
on.
on, man. It was a great talk. And
Oh yeah, it was a really good one. Really good one.
Could have gone on a little bit longer, but again, for me, it's about 2 a.m. now, and I really have to wrap it up. So
that's wild. So
maybe we can do a pre-recorded thing, and then we can get more into depth.
I have been meaning to learn how to pre-record for many years, so I'll have to actually figure it out one of these days.
Yeah, we'll figure something out, man, because it's interesting. I like talking to you, man.
Yeah, man, it was good. It was good. So,
okay, thanks for having me on, buddy.
Thank you.
All right, see ya. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. And so everybody who's in the chat, hang on. And just a moment. I'm going to go look over on the other stream and see what's going on, and if maybe we got our times mixed around, or if he's just finishing up and coming over here. I have no idea. I'll just tell you what I have been doing with the last couple of days. I have been working on a few different projects. One is on our webcomic Force of Good and Evil. I have been uploading our archives since we migrated servers last summer. And this next story coming up is a 7-page story called The Lady of Shallots, which features our hero, the connoisseur, who is a culinary telekinetic. He controls food with his mind. And with that, he is looking to it's a takeoff of The Lady of Shalott, the poem by Tennyson, a thematic inversal of that story, discussing subjects of courtly love in the context of teenage superheroes. So I'm actually pretty excited for that, and hopefully that's something that you guys will enjoy. It'll be going live after the show tonight, a page at a time. It also ends with a recipe for the featured dish, which I thought was only fitting in a connoisseur story. So that's that. I've also been working on the ashcan that is going to be sent out along with the expositioner story from our crowdfund from last year. And we had been hoping to get a second store set up for people that might want to jump onto that as it went, but we hadn't done that yet. I'm not great with technology, with web stuff, I should say. I can make a computer do what I want, but I'm not always good with. Anyway, point being, we are behind on the expositioner Sola Voce is the name of the book, and we are behind on production on that, but we're still working on the other parts of that campaign. And the ashcan is a couple of pages away from being done with lettering and coloring, and that will be going out to our backers digitally within the next couple of weeks. So that's pretty exciting. And so, yeah, I've just been working on comics, trying to get some story stuff put together. We are going to be having an announcement for a couple of new projects. One new project that we're working on is I've Been to Hell, which is going to be, we're hoping to crowdfund that this summer after we get everything wrapped from Sola Voce. And with it, it is the story of some of our kids from Hero School who are going, they take a spring break trip to hell, and wackiness ensues in that. Art is going to be by pencil art by Rolf Gardot, who does our main Forces pencils. Inks are going to be by Talias and Rhys. And this project this weekend is a story that Tali did pencils on, and his mother, Amy, did the inks on back in 2016. But 2020 Tali is going to be doing the ink work for the I've Been to Hell, and we're hoping to get that rolling here soon. And the art, the first 10 pages, the pencils are already done on. So that's what we're looking at with that one. I'm very excited for that. But yeah, that's where we're at with that. Those projects. The other one is my buddy Russ, who was on last week, and I are collaborating on another project that we will be announcing once we have a production schedule figured out for it, and some sample art. So that's exciting. I'm really stoked about that story as well. It's been floating around in my head in one form or another since 2002, actually 2002, 2003. It was a story that I had worked on. I had concepted back in the old pre-Ideal Comics days, and it's been readapted for that ideal audience. So for within that context of our universe. So that's where things are at the moment. So if you guys do have any questions in the chat, feel free to put them up there and let me know. I've just been yakking while we're waiting for Doug to come on, and I don't want to seem off-putting or anything, but I don't have a lot of stuff pre-prepared to talk about right now. So, yeah. No, I have not booked any interviews on any stream for my book currently because I'm not at a place where I want to do a lot of pre-press for it, where stuff's very much in the background on things. Although Doug Garrett and Tonic Mole and I have been talking about doing a stream at some point coming up here where we just talk about our comics and our process and our universes, and all that kind of stuff. And we'll probably be doing that in the next couple of weeks, but we haven't gotten that finished. So Ezra's been eating. Well, cool. I'm hopefully my rambling is entertaining to chew to. I do appreciate you guys, your patience and everything. Man, it'd be really a great night if I had contacted Matt McGibson to come on as a second base thing. So, is there anything out there that you guys have curiosities about? I happen to be a fountain of random information about all kinds of things. So if you happen to have any questions not related to my comics at all, say you want to know about the Renaissance or American history, there's a good chance I could have be able to talk for a while on it. As long as you don't get me talking about FDR, we should probably be fine. So, Twitless has a question. Out with your question, Twitless. Let's go. Speaking of which, Twitless is going to be on here as part of our guest panel in 3 weeks. Well, actually, I could talk about that in a little while we're waiting. So next week's show, I'm planning on having Tim from Column on, as well as probably a Draken who's got a new book that's going to be crowdfunding real soon. And they're going to be able to talk about their individual projects. I'm going to talk to Tim about his book Column and about kind of how his process is with that. So that's going to be exciting. And that's next week. Week after, no Mattriarchy. And then the week after that is going to be the Maudie Thursday, that Thursday before Easter. And I'm going to be having a special panel of people on to talk about Christianity and comics. I'm going to have Matt Krotz is coming on. Tim Lim is going to be coming on. My buddy Matt Johnson of Cortland and Out at 5 is coming on, who does webcomicer, and probably Doug Ernst and Twitless also. We're going to talk about Christian representation within comics, and both how they have been, how they should be, and how that relates to the philosophy and the ideas behind it. So things that are overtly Christian versus things that are not, I want to say covertly Christian, but intrinsically Christian, and talks about how that works on. So, do I, Ezra? Do I? I didn't see that. Do I tabletop role play? Yes. I've I've done the Star Wars system and D&D 3, 3.5, and 5e. But yeah, I do tabletop. The Ideal Comics guys and some friends of ours are actually developing a tabletop system that is rooted in our universe. It's a 2d6 tabletop system, and for those of you guys or anybody else who happens to be a backer for our Indiegogo, our trading cards on the back of them are going to have our character stats for the characters we're having on the front of the cards. So if somebody once we get our games called Heroes and Villains, once we get that finished and ready to play test, people will be able to play test with our characters as NPCs, or you could play them as player characters too. But yeah, so that's all going to fit into that. Twitless, what is love? Love is the desire for other people's betterment. It is the cry for the best, for not for only for yourself, but for others as well. And the actions that lead to that self. So that's love. Hey,
awkward.
Doug, how's it going?
Awkward. When did you send me the invite, dude?
6.
Is that 15 minutes ago?
No. That was about an hour and a half ago.
Was I supposed to be on an hour ago?
No, you were supposed to be on 15 minutes ago.
Oh, okay. So I'm only 15 minutes late.
I've been filling time awkwardly, so hopefully
I'm the worst guest.
Nobody else has left. I think
dude, I tell people all the time who schedule me, they go, it's going to be next Thursday at 8. I'm like, yeah, good luck. It's not that I'm doing anything. I was just chatting with a friend, with Ellis on my other chat, just hanging out with him. I go, holy cow, I think I'm supposed to be on a show. I have no system of because I can't figure out my calendar on my phone. I have no system of getting messages and getting alerts and all that to be timely with fine showmen like you. I'm so sorry, Matt.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I don't know. It's fine. Thank you for coming on my show, Doug. It's really cool. I appreciate that.
Dude, I'm here to hang, man. Bro.
Yeah.
We're here. We're here. Yeah, we're clear.
So this is weird. This is a little weird for me. I've been on your channel a couple times and it's been awesome, but I'm going to fanboy just a little bit because I'm a huge fan. Oh, just a little.
Okay, a little.
I have some
10 seconds
questions too.
Okay, questions are fine.
Yeah, I have substantive questions too, but I do want to talk.
Makes me sick.
Well, let me just tell you the story of how I came into be aware of you as a creator. Okay.
I'll tell you if it's any good or not when you're done.
There you go. So I was exposed to your stuff, your art, like a ton through my life, and I didn't know it was you.
Yeah.
So I'd seen Sock Baby. When I met my wife, she was a huge fan of Skull Monkeys. And she played all the time, and she's like, I love the style of this. And I'm like, yeah, it's totally weird and wacky. I grew up in West Nebraska, so we were big into the Christian ska scene in the 90s. So the Five Iron albums were house all the time. And I'd seen Earthworm Jim and everything. So
yeah,
I had seen all this stuff, and it wasn't. And I'd even seen some of your blogs talking about faith in literature, talking about Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
Stuff that I thought was really cool. And I didn't know it was one guy. And in I think 2014, I decided to I did some comic reviews on our website back then. And one of them was Bad Island. I picked up from the library.
Oh, that's a good one.
I enjoy it. And so I looked at it and I'm like, this is interesting. Who is this Doug TenNapel guy? And so I'm researching you, and it's like, boom, 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 all of these things that you've done. And so all of these things that I knew just kind of folded in together. And I'm like, that's the guy. I know this guy
has done everything.
He's done everything.
People don't understand. I am like a star of creativity. I am a brutal, mighty force. And I'm tempered with anonymity, which keeps me humble. That's what's so great, is that no one ever puts together the actual hub the fire hose of the octopus, like fire hose of 8 tentacles of talent going out to different mediums at once, all of them equally as failing and obscure as the next.
Yeah. And so it's one of those things where, seeing all of this, I've been able to like kind of see all of these threads of ideas and that have gone through it, that I really appreciate the thoughtfulness, and how at the same time especially your graphic novels are totally approachable for children, but they have this complexity that makes it just thing. And like I've told you before, Cardboard had just like the first time I read it, I broke down crying in the lobby of a hotel in Kearney, Nebraska.
That's one of the best things I've ever read.
Oh man, it's so good.
I farted that thing out. It was easy. It was easy, but there's certain stories just come, and they're just explosive when they come. And that was one of that one, and Tommysaurus Rex. And there's just, when they click, and you can't really tell until you're done that you go, man, that's bigger than me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's actually part of it, right? Is, people that are creative. It's like people that are smart, right? You're born smart. You don't create yourself smart. You have nothing to do with it. If you're smart, it's a thing that, that God said, I'm going to put this person together and I'm going to put a sponge in their skull instead of a brain.
That's right.
Let them know everything, let them just suck.
My best friend, Mark Lorenzen, who's down in Texas, who worked with me on a bunch of that stuff on Earthworm Jim and Neverhood. He's that way. He really is one of he's probably the smartest guy I've ever met. And like you said, with a sponge.
Yeah.
It's like perfect retention of all knowledge.
So, one question I did have for you, it's talking about thing. My wife is a visual artist too. She's been working at stuff for quite a long time, and she is really curious about what are your influences, because you've got such a unique style, your monster design, all the kind of stuff, your claymation. But what are the things that are inspirations to you?
Sure, I have a super eclectic yet specific background that are things that turn me on, that I just kind of latched onto. So, Chesterton writes about the terrible artist's temperament. It's like a huge insult, but I've always been artsy fartsy. So the artist's temperament, I'm drawn to. Like I always liked modern art, the Dadaists, Andy Warhol, Basquiat, Marcel Duchamp. The funky artists, they're terrible because they're low skill. They're all great ideas. And so in a way, I think what might have attracted me to them is that they're philosophical in their art.
Yeah. So style over substance sort of thing.
Style over substance. Yeah. And then, well, there's the substance is also integrated in the style, right?
Yeah,
they're saying things.
Yeah. It was a clumsy.
There's another side of me that really enjoys the skill-based arts. Obviously, that's the stuff that I respect, is Michelangelo and Bouguereau, Norman Rockwell, guys that just have this amazing skill that I can't achieve no matter how hard I try, because it requires too much discipline.
Well, and I know I can tell that because the way you talk about Sean Gordon Murphy's stuff, and he's a draftsman in his stuff. Yeah. It's so good quality.
He's like from another planet. So
it is.
And there's guys that are way better at what I do than what I do, which is they're cartoonists, but they have enough discipline about the cartooning that they're amazing. So guys like Bill Watterson and Jeff Smith. And Mike Dietz is one of my animation mentors who taught me animation, Milt Kahl of the Disney Nine Old Men. So I've drawn all these guys' work where I've latched onto it and go, I'm going to try and, devour that style a little bit. Like I might just spend a night drawing just their hands or something, I have a sketchbook where I would just go through Hellboy and I drew every hand in the book in my sketchbook. I would just draw it just to try and get that hand anatomy in, and only so much of it came in. Mm-hmm. But then it gets added to my tool belt, not perfectly, but like, let's say 50% of it gets added to my tools. And I really, so early, I'm always just vacuuming up different ideas. So early on, it was probably Yellow Submarine. The movie was a big influence on me. You see my characters have those lips, a lot like the Blue Meanies.
Right.
And that, Gumby. I did clay animation when I was younger. I've always sculpted in clay, which influenced the Neverhood, obviously, and Skull Monkeys. So puppet animation has been big in my background. And Gumby is a weird as hell cartoon. The original Gumbies are just psycho. And Sesame Street, so puppets and kind of Sesame Street was a real hodgepodge of different styles. Like they'd, go to animation with the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then a little bit of a puppet, doing something fun and educational. So they're always sneaking something in along with their character, which has influenced a lot of my work. And then Walt Disney and Mickey Mouse stuff, just that always, the cartoons just always seduced me. Snow White, Pinocchio, Peter Pan, Robin Hood, pretty much I would just watch everything. And to me, the magic of animation is a drawing come to life, which in my head, when I do my comics, those scenes are acting out and playing those characters are moving in reality when I draw them. So even though I'm not that good of a draftsman to really depict it, I'm saying to me, those people are real.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's an important part, even from a writing perspective, is to give your characters the breadth to have their own life, so to speak.
Yeah.
They have their own.
I don't treat them like a crappy art form, even though they are a crappy art form. I treat them like they're real, and then it elevates that art form with characters that look like they're.
I think that's a fairly, not to get too hoity-toity about it, but I think that's a fairly good summation of the human condition too. I mean, God is dealing with us as we are. I mean, He made us, He's flawless, but because we were born flawed, we are less than we should be. But through Christ, He doesn't treat us like we're less. He doesn't treat us like we're the dirt that we are. He understands and acknowledges and expresses and emotes.
He declares us righteous and kings in His Son. He declares us royalty. Even though we spent, like the prodigal son, all our time slopping pigs as slaves. So he here's the ring, put the ring on your finger. Here's the family coat of arms. Here's a party, slaughtered calf. And what did you do to earn it? So I do try and tell that story in a lot of my stories of the characters that are always like in some kind of weird accidental torment. And then there is what I think Joseph Campbell called it, the rescue from without, which is something that is higher than you, that comes in and, imputes you with knowledge or righteousness or something that helps elevate you. And the story continues. So those are early influences. And then also, so through the 70s, you'd have Star Wars was a big influence on me, of course. And all of Spielberg's work is where a lot of the kind of family and the true, like almost a romanticization of our emotions, of wanting to cry, wanting to feel joy and connection at the end of all those movies, Indiana Jones, E.T. That just always really, it blew my mind, the feelings that I felt in those stories. And in the 80s, I went to college, and that's where I studied a lot of the fine art. So that was all Andy Warhol, Marcel Duchamp, Kenny Scharf, David Lynch films, Eraserhead, 80s music and weirdo bands, Men Without Hats and David Bowie and all that started influencing me, some of the weirder stuff in my art. That's really, and then in the 90s, I started really getting more serious about my art and going, I didn't learn anything in art college. I was a fine art major. I need to learn how to draw the human body. So I got into Glenn Keane animation on Tarzan in the late 90s was big. And I took a lot of figure drawing courses, nude models, and really learning trying to render with that chalk kind of graphite pencil. And I learned at Jeff Watt's school, WATTS, was in San Diego, and he was kind of one of a guy. I just take classes. I was worse than everybody else in the class. They were incredible masters, and they always saw me as like the cartoonist trying to bump up his skills, and they were very kind to teach me their stuff. And then in the early 2000s is when I started working on my writing more. So that's when I really got submerged in Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, G.K. Chesterton, all of the script theories books. So Save the Cat, Joseph Campbell, Sid Field, John Truby, McKee, all those guys. I started studying story and kind of decompressing what made the 3-act structure and making that character and writing work. And that's pretty much, mix that in with a career of video games and television. And I've always been doing my own fine art on my own paintings and drawings and stuff that are not character based at all. That I've been in a band, a terrible band. I put on puppet shows. I'll help local theaters, just whatever I can do.
Movies.
Everything, making movies, selling movie deals, made my own film Mothman in the late 90s and learned 35 millimeter in production. Is just so I'm a mutt. Like, I'm not a master of any of these things, but I'll try almost anything.
And I think one of the things that actually adds to each discipline, as you look along, you kind of see you borrowing from one thing to another. And I think like the Neverhood is a great example of a lot of that kind of stuff. I know it was earlier than some of the other stuff we're talking about, but it's got just a lot of that kind of those cross disciplinary ideas to it.
Yeah. It's really when I really have always been in love with world building. Mm-hmm. The idea is I want to have you open a book or watch a cartoon and just your head is in this place. It's a whole environment, it's real according to those characters. They believe it's real and they live in it just like we live in our world.
Mm-hmm. So what is it about world building that is appealing to you other than it? I mean, it's a powerful thing for a creator to do, obviously. And I think it's one of the things that I think some of us are just drawn to that idea, but is there a specific element of that you're like, this is what I want? Because almost every one of your pieces is separate.
Is a completely different world.
Yeah.
And it's actually what's killing me about doing Bigfoot Bill and Earthworm Jim with multi-books is I want to make a new thing. And I'm kind of stuck in this other world, building it out further, and I'm ready to do something new. So, I'll probably wrap Bigfoot Bill 3 will be the final book next year. And I'll just make it as long as I need it to be. So it'll be at least 160 pages if I can do it in that amount. But if I have to go up to 500 pages, I'll do it. But I'm just going to make I'm going to finish that arc. I think I can do it in a book. And then, but yeah, I like the world building. That's just what I like about, in a way, it was probably the experience I had when I went to see Yellow Submarine. It was a world, it was a style, and it was a place. Gumby was a world and a style and a place. Each Harryhausen film was a different world, style, and place. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I liked them all. Every Disney film, completely different world, style, and place. So I guess I'm emulating that with each book, and I'm just not. I'm never as disciplined as Tolkien, who's stuck to one world.
Right.
And on mine, I kind of go, well, that world didn't quite work out, so I guess I'll jump off and try another. It's like me always trying to finally go, well, maybe this one will be excellent. Maybe this one will be my Lord of the Rings. And it's like, no, next one.
So, and it's speaking of Bigfoot Bill, though, that's a little different because it does share elements with your Mothman picture.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So that is sort of a continuation, at least in concept, at least in precept of some of the stuff that you were working on with that film.
Yeah, all of my worlds are technically tied to me. So I'm a hub. And so I wrote a thing in the Neverhood where it took place, after the tribulation in our world. There's references in the original Neverhood game where they found off one of the oceans, they excavated and found a chunk of clay that had a quote on it about Hoborg. And if you look at the wall of records in the Neverhood, that quote is in the Neverhood game. And so this guy's named Dr. Andelman it's in the liner notes of the Neverhood, and he excavated this thing. They said that the clay, the material that it's made of, is not of this universe. So I'm technically tying it to our world.
Cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have not played the first Neverhood game. I really wanted to, but I didn't know about it until
it's fantastic.
yeah. I haven't had a chance because I kind of found out about it after Skull Monkeys was already out and everything, and like several years after, and so I was like wasn't available for me to find in stores.
That's really hard to find and really hard. I can't get it to work on any of my computers, so you have to be able to emulate.
Well, I think you probably
Windows
have to, you have to install it into a partition. We have my kids. We homeschool my boys.
Yeah.
And we wanted to get them a typing program, and we couldn't find one for sale that did what we wanted. And back in our garage, we had a copy of Mavis Beacon from like 96 or something. And so we actually installed, and I had a working copy of Windows 3.11 on a CD. And so we installed that inside of a DOS box partition. So my kids, they click a button, it opens up a DOS prompt. They type Windows, it opens up Windows, and they can use Windows 3.11 software inside of that.
If you can teach me how to do that offline and do that on this PC to partition off a chunk, which I don't know how to do, and then put a Windows 95 emulator on, and I could do Neverhood. I'd love to do that because I could do a playthrough online and do a commentary on it.
Hey, that'd be great. Fun.
Yeah. I just need someone to teach me how to do all the tech stuff because I don't know anything.
That's a whole thing. And it's the kind of thing where for me, I had to like look up all the stuff each step along the way because I don't use it every day. I used it, years ago. So it's back here somewhere, but
I don't even know how to store files on this PC. I bought it last year and just set it up just for streaming. So I don't even know. I'd need someone. If anyone in your audience knows how to do that, they can reach out to me.
There you go. There you go. If there's any tech folks out there that want to do a solid to an old guy.
Yeah.
So
help a guy out.
Yeah. That would be some fun content though, for sure. So,
yeah. I can get a bunch of the Neverhood team on too, to go on stream with me, and I'll get Terry Taylor on to talk about music, and it'd be great.
So that's another question about the music to the Neverhood or Skull Monkeys specifically. Did Terry have like full reign to do whatever, and then you designed the level around it, or was it the other way around?
It was the other way around. It's always back and forth with him, but usually we would submit a level to him, then he would write a soundtrack to it.
Okay.
So
cool.
And then he would send us the songs layered. And so we would talk to him back and forth about how we could strip instruments out, to do different versions of the song. Yeah. And there was kind of one big full version of it on the final level that was in that world. So it was always building up to it. So it might just start with like a drum beat and one instrument,
Yeah, the Skull Monkeys soundtrack was the one I'm most familiar with.
It's insane. It's one of the best things you'll ever listen to.
And it's like got like 12 different musical genres that are worked in there, and it's crazy. And you can just tell that like Taylor is just a genius when it comes to that kind of thing.
He really is. And the Neverhood soundtrack it's one of his most popular works. And it influenced, video. It got Game of the Year, was the only thing that we got was the video game music of the year was on the Neverhood.
Oh yeah. It was great stuff. Great stuff.
It influenced a lot. And so to me, that's why I like working with creative people, and then just, you cut them loose, they'll always surprise you with great stuff. If you're working with a truly creative person.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. Especially if you can find somebody, at least I found with collaborations I've worked on, if you can find somebody who like, they're not just out there to get a paycheck, or they're not just out there to check a box. If they're really invested in the project, then you'll just blossom.
Yeah. I'm looking for creatives, not illustrators. So a lot of people that are just like gun for hire, they're just like, look, just tell me what to do. I want to spend as little time as this is possible. I need my money, and I'll plug in my work. I'm like, I'm not looking for an illustrator. Go illustrate an EA game. I'm looking for someone who will show up and be a partner in creativity and take some ownership,
So what are the things that is are one of the biggest changes? Because when you did animation, you did special effects, you did video games, and then you started doing graphic novels in the early 2000s. Yeah. What was the biggest shift going from working in a visual moving media to working by yourself at the drawing table?
Yeah.
Cranking these things out?
Well, I've always been a comic artist. So that goes all the way back to 4th grade. I've been doing my own comics, but I never thought I would do them for the public. Probably early 90s. I did Evil the Cat was my first comic in 91. It was a little 24 pager or something. Gear was 1998. And then Creature Tech was really where I landed. And that was in 2000, end of 2000, released in 2001. And that was just, I was realizing how laborious animation was. And I wasn't that good at it. I was good enough, but I'd never be like a Disney animator or anything like that. Again, because of my lack of discipline. And animation requires some level of discipline to be a truly professional, great animator. That I just kind of said, I really, it's not that I wanted to watch a character walk across a room at 24 frames per second. And most walk cycles are 12 frame walk cycles. I go, I want to know what that character's story is. And so most animators never get to tell a story beyond the scene they're working on. They're doing one clip. And they really don't have an influence on the actual plot. That goes to writers and directors and other people that tell the animators what to animate. So again, they're just illustrators. And I just kind of thought it's such a work-intensive medium that requires a team of people to turn their brain off and just illustrate or act a scene, and I really want to tell the big story, that comics was just a natural place to go. So I found that medium. And from early on, I really enjoyed that world building and that expression of story way more than animation, way more than video games too. I like playing video games. I don't enjoy making them. So
that's actually kind of funny looking back on your strip that you did for Mike Miller's book. Yeah. So how true to life is that scene?
Those are true, actual conversations I've had. Really.
I was just busting a gut because, of course, my kids are we've talked a little bit about it. My kids are older; they're 18 and 16, and they're at the point now where they've moved past the they look at dad like he's this thing unto a god.
Yeah.
And they see clay feet, and my oldest boy he's actually in some ways more competent than I am about stuff. And he doesn't disdain me, but he's just like, you could be better, Dad. And I'm like, true.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Harsh, but true.
My kids just think I'm someone who goes in this room and just kind of farts around with comics. And then last year at Comic-Con, we do a family trip down to San Diego.
Right.
And I never really talk about my career with them at all, with the family at all. And I was on a train, and someone I was sitting across from our family, we were taking the train down to San Diego, the Comic-Con, and a guy goes, "Are you Doug TenNapel?" And my kids looked at me like Dad? And then two other guys sitting next to him go, "Doug TenNapel?" And they walk over and they ask for my autographs. And I just looked at my kids and they're like, what did they want? Like they didn't understand that I had a past. So my goal is to hide it from them forever. So they'll discover it if they want to.
Well, and it's one of those things. I think that's legitimate, but I also think it's one of those things that there's a goodness in that, because we as parents, we don't exist for ourselves, right? Everything. Right. I mean, obviously we want fulfillment. We want to do all that kind of stuff. But when it comes down to it, like our function as fathers is to make sure our kids stay alive.
That's
right?
true.
So
I never wanted them to obey me because I have an amazing creative past. They'll obey me because I'm the father of this house.
Yeah. Yeah. And, exactly. And also like, I go to the office and they see me come back, and if they don't know what goes on, that's not their world. Their world is what they're building and how they're learning and how they're going to go into that world and forge their own path and then lay their own lives down to take care of their kids.
Yep. But I do still have to put food in their mouth. So everyone back Bigfoot Bill too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you've got, and actually I'm really excited for that project because you've got the Bigfoot Bill 1 re-release.
Yeah.
It's got 14 new pages.
14 new pages. And then the making of has another, I think 12 page or 14 page backstory of comic that will be included in this book along with a bunch of other pages. So it goes from 96 pages to 160 pages. So, lots more story, full rewrite. I'm really trying to buff that book out. with a worthy new release. So if you've got it already, you need to get the new one too.
Yeah, and I watched you working on the new cover with Alejandro.
Yeah,
that has got some real dynamism to it. I think it's a pretty good looking thing.
it's beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah,
Look at that. Look at that.
It's going to work.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm pretty excited for that project. I will be backing tomorrow probably.
Oh, that'd be great.
So, yeah. I'm totally stoked. I'm still deciding what package I want, but we'll figure it out.
Any 2-book package is fine. You can get the stripped down one for $50. It comes with 2 books, or you can get signed and head sketches and all that. But
So,
at least get the 2 books.
I'm assuming this is going to have another custom box.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, when you're shipping that much book, you got to at this point, right?
Yeah. My boxes are actually, they're not decorative. They're not made for display or anything. They're actually to ship the books and get them to you safely. We designed it so that it really snugs the box tight and keeps them from getting damaged.
And I know I was one of the fun things when the Earthworm Jim came, because I do have that. Actually, I have it right down here. So I actually finished reading it.
Oh, good. And what'd you think of it?
I loved it. Actually, it was really great. One of the things I liked about it was that without being on the nose, without being overly preachy, without being hectoring to the audience, it really poses the question of what the hell is a man and why is that a good or bad thing?
Yep.
And I think
it's buried in there, but it's there.
That's such a wonderful, powerful theme. And it was in a way that, like, if you're looking for themes, I don't think you can miss it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it wasn't something that was like hanging over the thing, detracting from the silliness, because it's profoundly silly.
Yeah, it is. It's stupid. It's stupid silly. Yeah. So that's the world of Earthworm Jim. That's the world that's built. And that actually made it very difficult to write, because it has to be silly.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going to write a giant story that doesn't have an epic, arc to it.
Right.
So it's a cohesive universe though, and it works, and it's going places. This next book I just finished. So here's Earthworm Jim 2's script is right here. And that's the first draft. So I got to do a rewrite on it. 72 pages. It'll get out to about 80, 85 pages. And then we start production.
So yeah, that's pretty exciting. So do you, you worked with a whole team putting Earthworm Jim 1 together. Are you going to have a similar setup with the second one?
Yeah, it'll be, I have a book designer who helps with the cover. That's my best friend, Joe Potter from college. My colorist is, on Bigfoot Bill 2 is Gabe El Taib, who's a professional colorist for DC. Alejandro Mirabal's he did some end sheets. So there's really nice design work on the inside of the cover and on the first page. And then I'll be doing all the writing. I did all the writing and drawing already. And then I got to letter all the balloons and then pre-prep it for digital print. I mean, digital pre-press is what it's called.
Right.
We have a couple months on all that, but it's a lot of work. I got a lot of work on it still.
Well, yeah, and I know Gabe's coloring it in between things.
He's bashing it out, man.
Yeah, his I don't want to speak ill of his project, but his colors are the best thing about Young Justice.
Yeah,
but they were not enough to make me keep buying it.
Yeah. He's good. He's very good. You hope the writing. Excellent. That's my beef with most comics, is the writing isn't up to par, even with the so-so art on most comics. I'm just like, if they can't, and the writing, it just doesn't take that long to write a great story, and they won't do it. They write garbage.
I think, I don't want to parse too much about Young Justice, but I was a big fan of Peter David's run in the late 90s, early 2000s. I thought he harnessed something, being able to take these characters that are serious in their home books and play them for jokes and drama in Young Justice. I thought was a brilliant formula.
Do you think that the cartoons, little animated goofy cartoons, had a bad influence, or the darkness of the Batman franchise had a bad influence on it?
I think it was. I think the darkness of what was going on in the DC universe after Kingdom Come kind of seeped into the universe as a whole, and creators were less willing and editors were less willing to hold bounds to keep the core of what the ideas were. So like the Impulse book that was there at the same time was pretty silly and fun. But like Flash was very super serious. And for a while they were doing a really good job of allowing these things to happen in conjunction.
Sure.
But then for some reason, but then when they got new creative teams in there, that the editors would be just like, oh, just, I don't know if they did whatever, but they lost something. And I think that's one of the problems that comics have had, like mainstream comics have had since the 80s, is that that they're wanting to cater to an aging audience, but they're not producing material for new audiences.
Yeah.
And so you don't have anything to lure kids into the newsstand because suddenly everything's, rape and everything's abuse and everything's, and not that those things are bad in stories. They're important.
Yeah.
But when they're everything, then you got a problem. And that's one thing, like
everything became the Dark Knight. Once Frank Miller came along, they said that and everything became that and Watchmen. Suddenly instead of them being the counter argument, they became the mainstream.
Yeah. And it took about probably 15 years to really get its teeth into things. It was probably 2000 that was like the death knell, but I mean, it was progressed toward that even while I was a young man.
Yeah. It's not a bright universe anymore. It's full of despair. And that's not why we read capes.
That's actually a conversation I had last week with one of my guests. He was my editor at Fanzine, DC Comics fan magazine back in the early 2000s. And he came into reading comics in the 70s. I mean, in the late 70s through the 80s. And he's about a decade older than I am, but he was saying that, Marvel used to be the place where everything was horrible because life sucks. And DC was the place where everything was dreams because dreams were important.
Yeah.
And now like the movies are the exact opposite of that. And that's puzzling to me. And I agree. It is puzzling.
They forgot who they are.
I think so.
Yeah.
And I think that they're chasing trends instead of chasing truths.
Yep.
And
I agree. And it feels schizophrenic. It's like, because the Marvel and DC brand means so much to us, that shield, sitting on that comic. And then when you open up the book, it absolutely betrays what that brand meant to you for most of society, the thing that put it on the map. It's gone.
Yeah. And I think that actually reminds me of something that you were saying last summer on one of your streams. Somebody was complaining about how, the current fans have all of these properties have left their fans behind. And your response was, well, let them. They own the properties. Let's just make new comics that speak to the same things that drew us in to begin with. And I think that's,
if someone puts me in charge of DC, I'll go do something about it. But I'm not going to sit here and bitch and complain about it, hoping they change their business model. When I'm sitting here, a creator of comics, I'll just go make mine. I'll show you what I think they should be.
I think I would really like that change, but I think somehow it's unlikely, Doug.
Well, I will offer my services. As soon as they want me to come in, I will lecture every one of them and tell them and fire 90% of them, and then just start over. Because I don't believe it's unfixable. I think they can change it in a quarter. Well, but they won't because their values are jacked.
Well, and I think you look at like, there's several times in the last even 10 years where a writer or an art team or even an editor have gone in and made little changes that have turned that light up a little bit, and the fans will cluster in and be like, this is the comic I want. And then, 6 months later, it's a bait and switch.
That's right.
And man,
it usually isn't an editor, by the way. Usually it's a creator that comes in that they'll throw Thor to him, or they'll throw X-Men to him, or they'll throw Batman at him, and then they cross their fingers and see what the audience thinks of it, because they don't know what they want. They don't know what's truth.
And I think that comes to that idea that they don't know what's truth, that speaks so much about what I think we're really a big part of our problem is. I was talking to 6 Scale Combat in the first hour.
Love that guy.
One of his big problems that he has is with this idea of revisionist history, where people they tell stories from the past that aren't true,
Right.
as though they were true, and not letting you know it's just, this is up for an opinion, or that this is an alternate history. They just go with it, and people don't spot it, and they don't see the harm in it. And a big issue of that comes to that we don't know anymore as a society how to find truth.
Yeah. And that's the brainwashing that goes on too, is they have to change the past. So I've heard it said, this is old saying around communist Russia, is that it's the future that is certain. It's the past that keeps changing, because they kept rewriting. When you have people like editing cigarettes out of Paul McCartney's hands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't get that.
It's like
whitewashing the Song of the South. They're going to change the past to what they prefer. And that's a terrible thing to do to history.
Well, see, and the thing about that gets me crazy is people that whitewash. They don't like Dumbo because of the crows. They don't like the Song of the South because the guy's a stereotype of everything that could be great about Uncle Remus stories, and the positive and uplifting things about the fact that these stories created by an imprisoned and a battered populace speak to hope and truth and goodness. No, let's ignore that goodness can exist in a place of
those are dangerous stories, too dangerous, and the audience is, and so the audience became as illiterate as the publishers too. Or it's like people that get after Huck Finn, which all Huck Finn does is point out the terribleness of the racist concept. It's the greatest anti-racist book, and they won't do it because he says a bad word, because a bad word is used in the book. It's so thin and stupid. But that's why we're doing crowdfunding comics. I keep appealing to my audience, saying, I only need one member in my audience. I only need one reader, and it'll make it worth it. Mm-hmm. So come in, and I will tell you a story, and I'll show you what I think the greatest story I know how to make at that time is all I can do.
So, George Alexopoulos has joined us as well.
George is here.
Hey, evening.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
So, one of the things I do have a question for you, Doug, is that you published under you've done indie comics, but you've published under Scholastic, and you've published under Image, and now you're doing everything yourself.
Yeah.
How big a change was that?
Well, the biggest, most painful parts of the change really is running the business, managing the print run, dealing with inventory, and delivering. Those are things that are not in most comic creators' forte. So I'm a quick study, and I'm learning as I go. And I've dabbled in and out of indie comics enough to know enough about it to kind of know what to do. But now I'm getting good at it. So, but that is the part that is shocking. Is you're basically Image. You're running your own publishing company.
So how many do you is there a projection where you feel like how many books you have in you for doing it this way, or is this just the course from here on until you burn out?
It's the course until I burn out, but I'm worried about this genre and this whole field that I feel like it's hanging by a thread. Like it could be stillborn if we're not careful with it. If we don't produce some great comics and really put a foothold out there. And I think there's a lot of shysters taking advantage of things that I just think it's not good for comics. Yeah. And I think we need really the spirit of great independent businessmen to come in and really, people talk a lot about audience respect, but I don't see it. So to me, my form of audience respect comes from, I work 8 hours a day at this, and that's writing and drawing. That's what I owe my audience. So
I think that's a big part of it. I mean, if we're creators, then we ought to be creating. And I don't think it's enough.
Always.
I don't think it's enough to just create, spectacle, and I mean, I have my YouTube show. I do it once a week. Maybe it's a spectacle. I don't know. I have, a few people to watch it or whatever, but, the meat of what I spend my free time doing is not this.
Yeah. If you look at my show over on the Doug show, we've been doing puppets.
Yeah.
Like, that's for me. and Mostly I'm making fun of the entire world with those puppets. In fact, the worse the puppet show, the better. So that's purely self-indulgent. It's really like what I take a break at the end of the workday and do.
So you're saying you'll never be the next Jim Henson?
No, I'm not that good. One of my puppeteers did work with Henson, though. He was the bear in the big blue house, is one of my puppeteers who he came on the other day.
Wow.
So I'm just saying I'll work with all different kinds of people, but as far as I have at least 1 or 2 books in me a year for the rest of my life is what I'm planning on. And I honestly don't know if publishing through Indiegogo is going to be long-term or not. We'll see.
Yeah. I was talking to Sixth about this too, but man, I really think that part of the problem all comics have, and I think it's exponentially worse for indie comics, is that there is zero effective distribution.
That's right.
Right. So even like your main guys and your big indies like Image and Dark Horse, it's all to the shops, and the shops can't keep up with the demand in a way that's generating more demand.
That's right.
And so I think that's part of why, DC and Marvel have like gone, oh, we're making these events so we can trick people, the really diehard people, to buy everything we've ever made because it's all tied together, rather than just making, 12 awesome books that, enough people want that they're shelling that out and being able to get them everywhere, because it's so hard to get them.
I think it's weird that I've never seen comics have so much cultural pull than they do today. And yet we're all so independent, and it's so disjointed, and it's so hard to get seen on the internet that no one can know about it. I think it's more like being a musician, where you can be a great band, and maybe all you can do is get an open mic night at a local bar, and you might be the best artist in the world. Mm-hmm. And there's these rock stars out there, you too, filling up arenas, and you might be as good as them or as entertaining as them. No one's going to know about you. That's really what it feels like in indie comics. Is everyone is their own killer band. There's good bands, there's bad bands, whatever. But if you're heavy metal, like there isn't a way to find your heavy metal audience. And if you're hip hop, you can't find your hip hop audience. You're selling your cassettes at a gas station. Is what it feels like. Yeah.
I know for my sake, I'd be just as happy with the cassettes at a gas station. But
I am. I'm saying I may not be able to do it as a living, but I'll be doing it, but it will influence the cost of the thing. If it ends up getting too costly, and if it breaks my minimum raise, say on Indiegogo, I'm not going to keep doing books and losing money at this level. I'll have to go, like I'm looking at opening up a digital platform for international, because the shipping is so outrageous to international. It's unfair to sell a $25 book for $150 to some guy in France just because he wants to try out your work. I really need to offer a digital tier, I think, to those people. So I'm looking into that. And you know how I am with digital. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. But just the function of it, I need it so bad that I just think.
And that's like one of the things, I guess, that, like one thing that Sixth and Doug Garrett are doing is, Sixth is out of the country, and trying to ship from Europe here is so prohibitive. He can't. It's not even possible for him. And so with Doug printing them and shipping and handling the distribution here and direct to consumer distribution, so there's less hangups than trying to get them into a store, but it becomes financially feasible for that. It would just be wonderful. And I know you love to have the hands-on of being able to drive down to API and get your hands dirty and everything. But it almost would be nice if there was some way of having international distribution be handled off-site or something.
Yeah, and I would never do that outside, because I have my own fulfillment center here who I also trust, because I can talk to them. I've just had friends that they had a whole shipment come over from China and go to UK or something, and it just vanished off the docks. And I can't manage that risk. So I will not trust international distribution. I will not trust someone else to look at the actual print run and say that it's good enough. That's not good enough for me. And so
I can understand that.
It creates delays. It would be fine. We'll leave them on this pallet, here in the UK where we printed them to distribute here, just to cut, some money off of shipping. I'd rather go digital.
Yeah, that's a fair balance.
They're both a compromise. So I'll just do digital.
I could
George.
George, what are your thoughts?
Do you need me to
this
jump?
week?
Is this a George show now?
No,
It doesn't have to be.
no, I wouldn't want that.
Yeah.
No, I just I hate the idea of interrupting when two brilliant people are talking.
Well,
One.
Yeah, one.
I'll take a half, maybe.
Matt knows.
I do so bad, and if it's not one-on-one, I never know when to talk.
Well, I'll jump in a couple minutes, and I just want to hang with you for a little bit.
Sure.
How are you?
Very good. Exhausted from work, not from illness.
What are you working on?
My black and white book called Bad Dreams. It's
cool.
Yeah, I'm doing it a little different than before. It's instead of doing a campaign right now, I'm just publishing it page by page on Patreon, and then when I collect enough pages to do a book, I'll just sell it on my online store.
Good idea. Are you getting any heat on Patreon? Are you getting some patrons?
Yeah. Right now I have 12 people.
Very good.
Yeah, I think at its peak I was in the 100 range, somewhere like that, when I was doing a webcomic every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see if, I just wanted to experiment and see if that's a viable option. And
I'm not so interested in Patreon, but I'm very interested in webcomics still, in putting them out for free, one page at a time, and then bounding them in a book. Because I just think if you can build a Comixology or whatever your Webtoons platform, if you can build that audience there, and there's audiences of hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, there's it's an experiment that I've always been curious about, because I grew up reading a lot of manga that I would never have been able to read because of translation problems, or they never translated and published in English. Yeah. And and of course, 10 years later, manga is like massive and everyone's buying it. Or not everyone, but it's bigger than it was. It would have been otherwise.
Pretty close.
It really blew up. Yeah. And so
especially like around here, if there's an associated anime, then the mangas will fly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like last year, like we do a little mini convention in our tiny little Midwestern town. And like every third costume was My Hero Academia last year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's enormous.
There's always, that's Shonen Jump, right?
Yeah.
I think it is. Yeah, they always have some flagship title carrying all the other smaller guys. And it's interesting to see that it's sort of like a gateway drug thing. People read My Hero Academia, or a few years ago it was Naruto or One Piece or Dragon Ball, But that's the gateway. And then people say, oh, how else can I read more of these types of stories? And then they go to Barnes & Noble and they realize, oh, there's shelves and shelves of this. So we talked about the future, or you guys talked about the future of indie comics. I'm thinking there has to be a couple of flagship titles that people like explode and say, wow, I want more of this. How can I find more? And then they can, I don't know, through networking or something, they say, oh, here's this random person I've never heard of. And it's really easy to get a hold of their book. I'll just read a few pages. And my thinking is the Patreon route. I think it's more common nowadays to do Patreon. It's like a weird appeal. Like, I know people would pirate a comic, and why not try to take advantage or mutually take advantage? Like, they get to read a comic for free, but in exchange, I want to make a deal with these people. You have to share my comic with someone. You have to. Yeah. And maybe one readership. Yeah. And only for $1 a month, you guys can feel bad, but also want to help support me. And I can do more comics if you guys just throw me $1.
Well, and it's like the situation with like Napster, right? And file sharing back in the day, right? There was so much fuss about it, but we find out, years later that was actually driving record sales, because people were getting the free album and then they're like, oh, I will buy the CD of this. Ooh, I will download this from iTunes now that I've heard it, the whole thing, and I know that it's not garbage.
Yeah.
And then that's one of the things, and like, so now bands just put their stuff up, the whole album's up for free on YouTube. Yeah. Because that generates sales for them, and they know that.
Because a lot of bands don't make money from the sales of CDs, I heard.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And you don't want to try and monetize your audience while you're trying to build them. That's an old rule that we have. Is you build them for free and get them up to 100,000, then you monetize them.
Interesting.
And that's like with our webcomic, when we started doing this back in the day, back in 2006, we decided that if we ever gave something away for free, then it stays free. That was one of the things we wanted. Yeah. So I've never had a very successful audience, but we've never charged them anything. And so for the stuff that was already free, I don't want to say, okay, here's 6 months of my crappy comic with subpar art, but it's got a fun story, and say, okay, now that you've had this for free, I'm going to pull it and give it to you, and you guys have to pay me for it. It's nothing.
Well, my problem with releasing digital is going to be just the piracy is going to go through the roof. They're just going it's basically releasing your comic for free.
Well, and it's like one of the things about that though is you look at like, and talk back to George's point about making people feel a little guilty about it. You look at like what they do with riff tracks, right?
Yeah.
All their stuff's DRM free. If somebody gets an illegal copy, they're just like, hey, you can give it, you can donate it to us. You can, make it right, support our little business. And they have that in there, and they seem to be doing okay. They're hiring people to work for them.
True.
That's what I can do.
Well, there's a game company called CD Projekt Red who released the Witcher games. And I read a story on, what book was it called? Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, amazing book, where they would release their games without DRM, digital rights management. And basically they allowed people to pirate it because in their culture, Poland, that was the only way some people could get games. And
our game Neverhood was pirated all throughout Poland. We never made a dime on it, but it was huge.
Right. So you built all these fans, and I guess the subtle contract there is to tell people like, look, if you can pay for this game, I can make more, but you got to find a way to support me. So it's kind of like front loading this sort of like, here's this free thing, but I really need to find time to make more of it. Can you guys help me? So it's like this cooperative thing where it's like, I'm not asking them to sort of, I don't know, there's this weird, like, let's take advantage of each other kind of thing, and it'll create a symbiotic relationship. That seems to be a business model.
I have a way lower view of human morality that nobody pays.
I know.
We made the Neverhood game for $1.5 million is what it cost to make. This is back, Spielberg funded our company, and they looked at how low our sales were on that game. And they just said, there's no way you can do another PC game. And that's why we ended up doing the Sony PlayStation platformer Skull Monkeys. And so the Neverhood, meanwhile, is pirated all throughout Poland and Russia and China. It is the #1 pirated game in those countries. Was the Neverhood. I have the largest audience base. They're like Earthworm Jim, who they know the Neverhood. And then they come to me now and say, why didn't you ever make another game? That's all our family wants, another one of those games. I go, well, you're from Poland and none of you paid for it. We never distributed, Microsoft never distributed Poland. So you enjoying it for free, and I'm happy they enjoyed it because we made it to be played. But that's why we couldn't afford to make another one. Because you all enjoyed it for free, and they do not pay for game. These pirate countries do not pay for stuff.
And that's kind of one of those things that it makes me wonder if it's not just a piracy problem if we're dealing with another distribution issue, right? Because if Microsoft didn't make it available in Poland, how else are they going to get it? And this was in the pre-internet days, so it's not like like Neverhood could have a donate button on your website or anything.
Exactly, or even in the game. Like if I could put out a PDF of my comics and have a donate button at the bottom and say, if you enjoyed this or if you pirated this, then consider donating. That'd be good.
How about releasing it in chapters, and then at the beginning and end of every chapter, you say, "Hey, Patreon, wink, wink."
I always feel like a homeless guy considering Patreon. Everyone has said I should try it, and I'm just
honestly, there is a stigma to it, but I don't know where it comes from because
it comes from me.
I see it as a tip jar, though.
Well, and I think part of it is that like Patreon is set up for monthly contributions as opposed to being set up like as a tip thing.
Well, there's something called Ko-fi.
I think that's one of the things that, and I think like one of the things like Doug's talking about is if you have an embedded in the PDF, right? And you're online reading anyway, because welcome to the future that we live in. It's a different thing to say, oh, I just really enjoyed that. I will hit the tip button,
Yeah.
Whereas,
put an email at an address at the end that just says, "Hey, if you enjoyed this comic and you got it for free, consider, PayPaling me."
Yeah.
And just put my PayPal information down there.
and I think the other
They
thing is
won't
like,
do it. They'll go, "Yeah, I'll get to it someday." But I'm going to copy this I'm going to put this on every BitTorrent server I can and send it out all over the internet. In fact, many of them will actually charge. They'll take the PDF of my work and charge for it.
that's crazy talk.
Yep. I have a low view of
the way that you can control that, though, is by keeping the new chapters to yourself.
Yeah.
And then saying, I can give you guys something that the pirates can't, is new content. So that's why
you have to
need
pay for it as a book or as a PDF, because when I send a PDF, that too will get pirated.
Yeah.
There's no way around it is the thing. So
No.
it's kind of once I jump into digital, I see it as a huge threat to my business. It's
Well,
a
they can
huge
even
threat.
scan. I mean, scanlations were a big thing.
Yeah.
back in the day, but
True.
they could just take photographs of your book. They're going to do it anyway.
True.
So my thinking, I don't know if it's a good experiment.
A
or not.
lot less people do it though when they have to do the work. They won't even do that work.
No, I guess not. I don't know.
Yeah.
When you release 20 graphic novels, and I go to the BitTorrents and see which ones get pirated and how broadly they distribute, you just go, no one's paying for this.
I don't know.
They're pirates, and today, this generation, they want everything for free. The good nature in their heart does not pay for that's mankind's heart. In general, if he believed in piracy, there's zero obligation to pay back and keep that thing going. That's my opinion.
Yeah. I think there's some definite weight to it, but I can't argue with you. And I think, I don't know, we haven't really talked about this a lot, but I have a pretty low view of humanity as well. It's
The
kind of
moment I released the digital of Bigfoot Bill 1, there is no need to buy the book to about 99% of the audience.
Yeah.
$0, and then you're ripping off the people that did buy the book. Why did I pay $25 for a book and that guy, and it's going everywhere for free?
Well, being able to hold the tangible object is very valuable.
Yeah, to some.
I don't know. I mean, it's like an entry thing. Like maybe here's this new book I've never read before, but I read the digital version so much and I enjoy it so much, and then I decide I need to have it in my collection. I imagine there's a percentage of those people. There has to be.
Well, and I think it's one of those things too, like, where how hard is it, how rare is it to get a hold of? I think if somebody, and then the other thing about comics that used to be, right? Comics used to be a microtransaction system at the newsstand. You'd put down 50 cents, you'd put down $1.25, and it was just pocket money that kids would get from scooping cat turds or mowing lawns or whatever else. And so once it moved beyond that $1.50 mark, right? Once it moved beyond that, maybe even $2 mark, suddenly it became like a prized commodity instead of a microtransaction commodity. Yeah. And it mattered more. And like with Doug's you're making epics of books. And I appreciate
it. It takes
that,
me like a half a year to a year to draw, to write and draw them.
But I know, like my heart, I love Ashcan comics. I love the down and dirty, printed on photo paper, the whole
thing. Love zines. I love the little zines.
And we're doing all that kind of thing.
I even have a group of people who they'll flat out brag on Reddit and just say, I never will give Doug $1, but I read all of his work pirated. I'll wait till it's free. And there's people who will actually distribute my work for free so that I don't make money. They're fans of my work. They intend to never give me $1, and they're actually distributing my work for free to make sure I don't make money on it.
And that is evil.
That's human nature, baby. Now you see why I'm so bitter.
Surely, though, there's an advantage to knowing that they're going to do that, though. You can use that somehow. I mean, at the very least, they're giving you free advertising. That has to be valuable somehow.
Yeah, I believe in intellectual property rights, that I own them and I control them. And so to me, it's like someone's pulling the car out of my garage. I don't think it's cute that they're advertising my car around town. It's my car.
Yeah.
And so I really believe in intellectual property rights, and all of that philosophy comes from socialism, that that the public or other people own your work and not you. You don't own it and you don't create it.
Yeah.
And if I want to distribute your work, I can, because there's no truth and no rules, is the philosophy behind it. And I don't know what to do. I'm far more moved to get my work out to my European audience through the Indiegogo than I am even of protecting the work. But you're in fantasy, George, if you think you'll be rewarded for doing that. You will be punished for doing what's right.
Well, currently I'm not making any sales anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I do okay. And I'm just saying, I don't want to ruin that little bit of work that allows me to even print the book.
I know. I mean, I'm at that point where I'm desperate enough.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I have nothing to lose by giving it away. My thinking, I don't know.
I just wouldn't try to make a living at it. My thing is, and I don't mind not making a living at it. It just means I have to go into teaching. It's going to affect the amount of hours I can put into this stuff. And I'm willing to do that because I'm a storyteller first, but I'm not going to say I'm going to put it up online. I at least will deliberately do it for free. And then when I get nothing for it, I won't be disappointed with a really naive plan.
There is a model that I'm curious about. You would have to have like 100,000 people following.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of webcomics people who have it's KO-FI. It's like Patreon, but it's a single, you just buy someone a coffee, basically, is air quotes. They have that. Yeah, basically. They have all these different methods of, hey, do you like my stuff? Throw me $1 or something like that.
And I think that's one of the things I was working my way around to saying earlier, but I very rarely say things incredibly directly. But is that I think that where we're at with the gig economy right now is that everybody has their favorite way of paying. So some people be like, oh, I'll just send them a Patreon donation because we're buddies, or I will PayPal, or I'll be on Patreon because I want to see them produce constantly, or I liked this video. Coffee.
Yeah.
And so I think that one of the things I want to do with our website is that I want to get multiple streams in there, but every single one of those is like a whole new learning curve. And I just want to write stories. That's all I want to do. So managing the archives and building the websites and all that kind of stuff that I know I need to be better at gets pushed to the side because I'm coloring or I'm lettering or I'm writing. And I just that's what my passion is.
Yeah. My problem is I've raised 80,000 on Earthworm Jim and 90,000 on Bigfoot Bill 1 and 2. That's about $170,000 that I'd really hate to see vanish because I put it out for free. Like I'd hate to see that cut in half, let's say. And it easily could if half the audience is just so on it. It's like that kind of stuff has happened in my career all the time.
I heard it compared to the sort of like there's vinyl. People are crazy about vinyl records and stuff.
Yep.
They'll pay extra amounts of money just to get that. Whereas the digital people, I don't know. There's a lot of, I think we're in a period of transition. And we're all kind of everyone's trying something different to see what works.
Yeah.
But there's no way to know. You said this last time we talked, Doug, is comics might not even exist in 10 years. It might be like visual novels or something.
Right.
So we don't know what it's going to look like, but the base set of skills, storytelling, drawing, those are always going to be constants. Those are valuable inherently.
What I would be willing to do is try one book as my sacrificial lamb, put it out digitally and see what happens.
It can't hurt.
So you never know.
I mean, if the quality of the book is so good, like as far as anyone's concerned, your books are the top of the
top tier.
Food
my
chain.
very best I can do.
Anyone who cares about collecting is going to want to have that in their collection. Yeah. So the people who, for lack of a better word, fetishize books, like they need to have that. They're going to buy it regardless. And then someone who might not know if they want it yet will read it digitally and say, oh, no, I do need this in my collection.
Yeah. And the thing I like is the idea of it shouldn't cost you that much money to try a book.
Yeah.
And but I feel like my brand is solid enough that they should know what I do by now. I've done it 20 times. I mean,
and one of the things, I think there's some real evidence behind that, Doug, too. One of the guys in the chat, Twitless, said, I discovered Doug's work at the library. So that model shares well. And I think that you do. I mean, your scholastic work has been so widely.
It is huge.
That I think that the name itself has a lot of weight just because of that.
And that's another option I've thought of, by the way, is instead of doing digital, selling through libraries, because my work does very well. So I'm looking at expanding into libraries actually as a legit, that would piggyback really well with my Indiegogo stuff, keep it independent and small.
Do you do things like t-shirts and stuff, Doug?
I don't, but I like the medium of t-shirts, so I want to do it. But the margins on t-shirts are so small that usually you can't. It's not a source of income, anyways. It's a good source of artistic expression.
I don't know if it's worth looking into, but we made our t-shirts here at home, and we could sell them for, I think, or the manufacturing was less than $5, and we sold them for 20.
I can get them already. I can get all my shirts for under $5 and sell them for 20.
Yeah, because they say with bands, like that's merch is how they make a lot of money, and
that's
of course, live shows.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. I'm not, I don't have the crowd of people that I entertain. I have I'm doing 400 people a show right now on my YouTube channel, and those are kind of the hardcore fans of the band.
Well, and the other thing that's different too is that when you go into concerts, you're going to an event, and it's like going to a con where people go to embrace the environment of the thing. And they're going to they often are going to pick up a memento. They're going to pick up a thing because they're in the fury of it. And some of that fervor is related in the crowdfunding experience.
Right.
But that's not something unless a lot of people don't get routine sales from shirts from webcomics or from stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's short bursts when something exciting is going on,
Yeah. I'm just saying this as the guy, I have the #1 raise on Indiegogo history. And I'm telling you guys, this is held together by a thread.
Yeah.
So it's not, people see that and go, that's all I need. It's like, that is not a solid business. That is, we're still experimenting and trying it out. And in the meanwhile, I have to keep making books. I love telling the stories is what holds me together, and then figuring out how to make a living out of it is that's a trick in and of itself, and really not that big. It's barely even my job. It's like I'm a businessman, but I'm very, I had to become a businessman to be an artist is how I see it. The business protects my art. It's not the driving force of it.
And isn't that an idea that the business is there to serve the art, not the art to serve the business? That seems like a novel idea in today's market. Who would think to pursue something like that first and foremost?
Yeah, I just loved, and I never felt like someone owed me their money to get to tell a story. So I'm way okay with just flipping it all to web comics. And if a tip jar brought in enough money, it'd be easy to flip digital and just not print books. If people don't want the books, I see it as a multi-year experiment to see how well the books will, if the business continues to grow, it's doing well, but it's not like it does such gangbusters that it's the end all be all thing to do. It could very easily move on to something else, or I'm looking into Amazon stores and things like that. And that's my bigger fear is getting deplatformed on both platforms. Frankly, when I see where culture's going, there's going to come a time where I'm not going to be able to use these platforms.
And that becomes one of the other things too, as far as like looking at market share and stuff, is like, how tough is it? Because it is incredibly difficult to build your own platform. That's one of the things that we have been fighting with our comics for a long time. Back, we were on Comic Genesis years and years ago, but they had server problems and we couldn't update. So we said, we're just going to put our coin into our own website, and we've been maintaining it for a decade now. Probably more than a decade. Yeah. And it's hard. I mean, it's like getting people to come to your website is difficult, even if you're the #1 search on Google.
Yeah, you really need, like, to me, the biggest thing that all of us need is Amazon. It's like Amazon's where everyone shops.
It is, but the thing is that the other part of the Amazon problem and is that their cut is significant enough that it keeps that entry level, that curious person from buying.
I just wouldn't use their shipping and distribution.
Yeah.
I would use my own shipping and distribution guys, almost like a Spotify store where they buy the book through Amazon, so you get their front portion of the business, which is big. And people feel very confident, way more confident giving money to Amazon than they do to Indiegogo and Kickstarter.
I've been using Etsy, and I like it a lot.
Etsy and Shopify are great.
Yeah,
that's what I'm looking into. Also, is that's more appealing to me than Patreon. Okay, guys, I'm going to jump.
Oh,
well, Doug, thank you so much for coming on. This has been awesome, actually.
And George, weird dust up today. So people were sending me tweets going, "What the hell happened?"
Man, it's like I want to say something, but it seems in such poor taste.
I know, it's so dumb.
It's really dumb.
Someone, I don't even know. I didn't. All I'm saying is someone said that I had influenced George or something. I don't even remember. I don't know what they're talking. This is the second day in a row they've just outright told a complete lie about me that has nothing to do with the truth.
You're a bad influence on the kids. You're the rock and roll.
I wonder who branded me as the center of all the trouble.
Oh, I have some ideas.
No, I don't know. He's they do they're very responsible with their marketing wing. Well, I'm Doug TenNapel. I'm signing off. I'm villain of the day.
Yes. Thank you for coming on to the Mattriarchy, Doug. And if you ever want to come again, open invitation.
Yeah. Oh, I'll definitely do it again. Yeah. I love
awesome.
it. And next time I'll be on time.
So those of you guys who are in the chat who are watching, Bigfoot Bill 2 is crowdfunding, and the links are in the description below. Doug's got a channel where there are puppets and occasionally conversations about philosophy and things that do really matter. As well as conversations about things that don't matter at all.
Doug TenNapel on YouTube. I'd love to have you guys as readers of Bigfoot Bill 2. I'm going to work my ass off on that to get you a great book with the best printing quality, best cover. Right? And we just now hit 95,000, so we released spot gloss on the cover. Nice. So it's going to be nice. God bless you guys. Good night.
Night.
Later, Doug. Thanks for coming on. George, how's it going, man?
Good. Man. I hope I'm not coming off as tired or anything. It's long days these days.
Well, yeah, and you're out there in Jersey, where it's 2 hours later there than it is here. So
ground zero, man. I'm telling you.
I tell you what.
I've never seen anything like this.
So what is it like? I mean, like, are you in the city or are you in the country?
It's hard to explain if you've never been to New Jersey. It's super, super dense where I live.
Okay.
We're kind of like, I could see New York from where I live. That's how close I am. But it's very suburb-ish. All the houses are really tightly packed together. There's no such thing as like having property, really. It's just a yard. And everyone's very densely packed together here. And you would have to travel pretty far to see open country. And it's kind of shocking to realize, that's what America actually looks like.
Oh, so when people say jokingly that it's the Turnpike State, that's not a joke.
Turnpike State. I mean, we have the Turnpike here. That's famous. And is there a different word? Does it mean something different for you guys?
Well, no, it's just the idea that there's just cities and roads and urban development constantly.
Oh, yeah. The density is crazy for sure, especially where I live is northern New Jersey. So if you go south toward the beach, for instance, it's very open and nice. If you go to western New Jersey towards Pennsylvania, northern Pennsylvania, if you go down towards Philadelphia, actually, it's pretty crappy, if you ask me. It's my opinion. Towards the Trenton area. And obviously, there's jokes there to be made, but honestly, that area is pretty scary. If you don't want to have a breakdown there, I was joking. Do you know Sanic?
Yeah,
not Sonic, but Sanic.
Sanic, the little meme thing.
Yeah, it's like fake Sonic, and those drawings crack me up. But I went down to Camden to see an Alice Cooper concert a while ago, and I was joking that like it looks like a town, but everything's just a little bit off. They don't have like a Target; they have a Torget, you know. And I was
Really?
joking. That's that's
No.
a joke. But like
It's like
that area of New Jersey is the Sanic of New Jersey. It looks like a real place, but everyone's like there's people talking to themselves on every corner. It's creepy. But yeah, I'm sorry. Going back to the density problem, it's really eerie to see how empty all the streets are now. And you go to a grocery store and it's like there's this eerie. Everyone's kind of looking at each other. Don't get too close to me. Yeah.
So is this is that are you guys under like a citywide like official?
Oh, the whole state's locked down.
Whole state is okay. I wasn't sure.
I mean, yeah, there's a soft curfew after 8 o'clock. You're not supposed to go out, like driving. Like some people were going out to like bars and stuff after 8 o'clock, and you're not supposed to assemble in groups of bigger than 10, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you won't get like a ticket or anything, but you know you'll get your finger wagging from a cop or something like that.
Yeah, move along, boyo.
Yeah, I mean it's not smart in general. You don't want to be in crowds. That's how the only way this will stop spreading is if people actually stop being around other people.
Well, the funny thing to me about all of this is that people act like that's news, but like that's how all viruses spread, right? It's about population density and viral load. And so like I live out in the sticks, right? I live in the largest city in western Nebraska, and there are like 30,000 people in my county.
Yeah.
Right. So it's very rural out here. And like our town's gone a little crazy with the paranoia, which I was really surprised would happen because 10 years ago, most of the population, well, a big chunk of the population were raised by people that lived through the Great Depression. So they were used to, toughing it out.
Yeah.
And I thought we would tough it out because that's how I grew up. But there's enough of those kids that have grown up now that there's panicking that's going on. And our Walmart was bare like 3 days ago and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. That's the big, sorry.
They've refilled it mostly since then. But
yes,
I was there today to pick up a couple of things, and everything I needed was there, and I didn't have to hunt too bad for it. But I wasn't expecting, skeletonizing the Walmart at all because I thought we were made of tougher stuff than that, where people were ready and prepared and knew all that kind of stuff. But out where you're at, where like everybody, there's like you can't swing a rock. I mean, swing a dead cat without hitting a person. No. Like that's. I could never live in that environment, and I don't understand why so many people do.
It's because we're so close to the city. There's a lot of commuter types. Mm-hmm. And like my family, when they immigrated here, they lived in New York, Queens. Mm-hmm. And then they came to New Jersey, and then they further spread out to other parts of the country. But my family stayed here. The only reason I'm here is because I was born here, and it never occurred to me that I should or would want to live somewhere else. And then I visited places like down where Doug lives, down in the Nashville area. And it's like, wow, it's so nice here. And then I go to other parts of the country, like, I don't know. It's just, I have people that I know up in Massachusetts or New Hampshire or something like that. It's like, wait, the rest of the country is so gorgeous. If I had the opportunity, I would have loved to live in a more open area. But then again, the area I live in is more... like anything you would want, even open areas are only a few miles away, really. Like I can go skiing, I could go to the beach, and they're all a few hours drive away. It's not that far.
Yeah, out here you cannot go to the beach.
No,
we have lakes. Many of them are reservoirs for irrigation, and they have beaches. But having been to both coasts, I can tell you they're not the same. But I didn't know that for many years.
No. And I wouldn't recommend coming to a beach in New Jersey anyway. It's a fake beach. But the boardwalks are awesome. It's a lot of culture you could soak up here. Down if you go to an area called Cape May, down in the very southern peak of New Jersey. That's nice. That's really nice.
Yeah.
But man, once I went to like Hawaii and Greece, and then I saw what an actual ocean's supposed to look like, I'm like, wait, I've been lied to. This New Jersey beaches are not what beaches are supposed to look like. It's really gross.
No, I think I know what you mean. I've not been to New Jersey myself, but I think I know what you mean.
It has its charms.
Yeah,
It
and
has its
I've been out east, but the farthest north I've been is Bethesda, Maryland, actually.
Oh, I used to go to a con there.
Yeah, I've been to DC several times and taken the train up as far as Bethesda, but that's as far as north as I've been on the eastern coast.
Oh, cool.
And I've been down to Florida. We've been around, but yeah, I came back when I decided it was time for me to drop out of college because I had no money. I came back to Western Nebraska because I like it here. But
yeah, I guess that's just a thing in our psychology is we like to be where we were raised. I don't love dense areas. Like I really hate cities. I used to live in New York when I went to college, and I couldn't stand it. I need to see some green. I need to be able to go on walks. But I also am a mall addict, so I like to be around malls. It feels like home to me. As much as I love open areas like say Tennessee and stuff like that, I feel like I would get lonely and bored.
Yeah, and it takes some getting used to. That's for sure. But I don't know, man. I can't. I used to live in Denver. I spent my young years in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I've lived in cities.
Cool.
But I prefer not to. So
Man, there's so much I need to learn. I hope someday I get to do the con circuit and like visit different cities and see how it's like to live in like Texas and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm so curious.
Yeah. The metal in the chat was talking about that he's originally from New Jersey, but that his family got the heck out to Texas when he was very young. So.
Yeah. I had a lot of friends who moved after 9/11. They're like, we don't want to be around this.
Yeah. That has got to be tough. So were you, now you're a little younger than I am, I think. Were you actually in New York when that was happening?
No, but my town was near enough to New York that you could basically throw a stone and hit it. But yeah, we could see I don't remember if we talked about this last time. We could see the smoke from the towers. And there's a story I not like to tell. It's horrific, but like the smoke sat over where the towers fell for like days, and it didn't come down until it rained because like the smoke was just so dense, I guess. But yeah, we would go. I was a junior in high school when it happened, and we were driving on the turnpike that you're talking about, and yeah, we could see the city and we could see the smoke, and man, a lot of people got spooked and they moved. Like my best friend at the time, they left like 2 years later.
Yeah. That's got to be an intense thing. I remember, not to be a downer on the whole thing, but cool. the day all that happened, and I've never been to New York, right? So the day all that happened, I was watching on the television when the second tower got hit, and it was filmed, right?
Yeah.
And I did not realize how large the towers were. So I didn't realize that this was a passenger plane that had hit because I had no context.
Oh, you thought it was like a small biplane or something?
Yeah, like a little private like a turboprop or something, because I had no context for how big those buildings were.
Yeah.
And so I saw that and I was like, well, what the hell was that all about? That was crazy. I went to work and everyone was in a dither, and this was before they fell. And so I looking into it more and I realized how big the towers were, and the thing that I saw and that settled on me, right, in a way that like in a slow dawning about what was going on, because I had no context for how large they were. And about the time that I understood what I had seen was about the time the first tower fell. Yeah. And it took the gut out of me. It was a hell of a thing.
It was nuts, man. We had kids in my school whose parents were in that area. We had one girl whose dad died because we lived that close to it. And it was so strange because all of us, the first question for everybody was, do we know someone who was there? Because we're all so close to it. But we saw it. We were flipping through the TV. Like my teacher was going to show some video of something like in history class. And then I saw the news. I'm like, wait, go back. And we only saw the first tower on fire. And then we were watching, like, is this a movie? What is this? And eventually we realized what was going on. We saw the second tower get hit and we're like, oh crap. And then, school let out and I was like glued to the TV for the next 3 days. But I was always thinking, I always tell this part of the story is that not if only, but if I had been 2 years older, I would have jumped into the military and had a completely different life. I was so like glued to it.
Mm.
But I was, there were recruiters in my school, it's like, oh, we don't know who we're going to war against, but we're going to war against somebody,
Mm-hmm.
It was a very strange time.
It's actually kind of interesting. This subject comes up because in the first hour with Sixth, we're talking about the war, the will to win wars in relationship to Vietnam, and one of Sixth's big issues with the way Vietnam was done is that the government wasn't clear with what it was going to take, and so they took half measures to try to appease the populace rather than actually stop the Vietnam War early.
Yeah, it's sort of like sorry.
And we had the same thing happen in Iraq and Afghanistan, where we went in half measures instead of with the kind of force that stops wars. But we as citizens, I was grown at that point, but we as citizens weren't told what it was going to take or how long it was going to take. It was just nebulous years, and at the beginning, people were serious about it, but nobody took steps to actually stop anything.
Yeah.
And that was one of those things where I know, like when that happened, I at the time I was doing working in a call center doing tech support for people, but I had previously been a construction worker, and I just about thought, is there anything way that I can use that knowledge set to help people get out, but of course I'm 2,000 miles away and had a clatter trap of a vehicle and everything.
Sure. I mean, it was just an emotional.
It was.
You can't think straight during times like that.
Well, and the other thing, my boy, my oldest was 3 months old, when all of that happened.
Yeah.
So that was.
It's not some. I guess the best thing to do is to step back and like think if you can during times like that.
Yeah. I mean, well, and there were so many people that were on site that were near that were able to help.
Yeah. And you hear all those stories about the guys that I don't want to get too depressing.
Yeah, but there was a strength of the human spirit that was on display. I think that in those days after did right as much as could be by the victims and by the survivors. And I think that's something that I honestly feel like we may have forgotten about in the last 20 years. Just because so much else has happened, but
I've seen strange little sparks of it these past few days, with people like looking at each other, like, can I help somebody out, that needs food or water or something like that. Like people, I think, want to try to be generous, but they don't know how. And during a time like this, for instance, the Corona stuff, it's like my instinct is, I want to, I don't know, jump in my car and bring water to people. It's like, yeah, but that's going to just make things worse. If I catch it, then I'm giving it to everybody else.
That's one of the funny things about this whole deal too. Everyone says, we'll do mail order delivery, or we'll, all of this kind of stuff. And it's like, so you're going to send the postman out to just spread this thing around to everyone.
It's weird because you want people to be as smart as everyone else, but then there's people who, like, I saw a video of some kids going down to spring break in Florida. It's like, oh man, you absolute idiots. Like, I don't know. But if it was so perfectly coordinated, yes, that would work actually. To have a bunch of delivery people and the supply chain, just keep it moving, give people a certain time that they can go to the store. And, if everyone just did that, we'd probably be fine.
I think part of the thing too is there's just so much conflict about the whole ordeal, and the other side of it too, just because there's conflicting information, I mean to say, and we're still figuring stuff out about how dangerous it is, and what percentage of the population will have the kind of horrible side effects it can have, as opposed to people that'll get it get over it,
Yeah.
and figure it all out. And then also, like, it's super infectious, but once again, like, you know, like I said, I live out in the sticks. Do we have enough people that we're going to have an epidemic problem out here because we have such a low density of people? You know?
I strongly doubt it.
I don't think so either. Just like, you know, like America never had a big problem with SARS, not because we took exceptional measures for it, but because we have so much less density than China, where it was really bad.
Exactly. And Italy and South Korea.
Yeah, but
those
Asian countries have crammed. Well, Japan has to because it's only an island, right?
Yeah.
Or set of islands, archipelago. But China and Korea have crammed everyone into the cities, and so they're just packed in, and then the countryside's empty. So there's just this artificial cook pot for bad infectious diseases for the spread of them because they're so spread out.
Yeah.
But
no, you guys will be fine out there.
I think so. And I think a lot of people,
cities, places like where I live, that's where we have to be ultra careful. Like I've been saying to everybody I know, it's like, I'm not scared of getting it, but I'm scared of spreading it. So luckily I get to work from home anyways. So I'm basically I'm not going anywhere.
Well, and that's some of the other thing too that's funny about this, or sad maybe, about the spring break situation, right? Is that all those kids that are down to this massively densely populated Florida, which is a coastal city, which coastal cities are always hotbeds for this kind of thing anyway, because that's where people come in and out of nations, is the coast. So
it's a mess.
It's sort of like, maybe take spring break in Utah. You know?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I guess we're gonna have to wait and see. I guess I don't think we've seen. We're not close to the plateau yet. It's still too early to know.
I think you're right there, but I also think that I think that our media has done a grave disservice in spreading panic and not information. Yeah. I think people spent too long looking back at the history of it all, spent too long waiting for it to become an issue before making it news.
Yeah.
And I think that I actually believe that may have been coordinated, but
there's no way to know. But yeah, I'm always willing to go in that direction too. My thinking, but there's no way to prove it. Anyway,
you know, because the impeachment was so important, we had to spend all this time paying attention to it. Well,
yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah,
that's a rabbit hole and a half. I could go into.
It is.
We could talk about
anyway.
I'm sorry.
We have about 10 minutes before 9. Let's talk a little bit about your book.
Sure. It is a black and white book. I mentioned this earlier. It's called Bad Dreams. The idea is that instead of doing a campaign for it and like going through everything that we're used to, I'm just thinking I'll just do it page by page. I'm uploading it page by page on Patreon right now. And yeah, the plan is once it's collected, like the first chapter is 32 pages. Once that's collected, I'm going to put it into a single issue and sell that on Etsy. And then when it's all done, there's 4 issues. I'll sell that as a trade paperback. I'll do a campaign for that. Maybe we'll see.
Cool. So what is the I think that's actually a really interesting thing. And that's actually something that we have been experimenting with our stuff. But I've had some problems getting the production file put together because we had a Patreon only webcomic that was for that, and I just haven't been able to. I've had some problems putting together the print file for it. But yeah, I think that's a really good model. That way people, they've been paying for a product, then they can, get that progressively, and then also have it, at the end of the day too. So a physical copy. I think that's a cool idea.
There's multiple experiments that I'm running. I don't know if any of it will work, and I hope nobody gets mad at me, but if it's only for $1 a month, I don't think people will get too mad. Like, let's say every issue digitally, I want to release it as a PDF for anyone to read. And my theory there is that people on Patreon can, for instance, see me as I'm making the book, see the pages as I'm doing it. And then you can also see the production notes as I'm doing, like you could see my thumbnails, pencils, then as I add tones, you could sort of get the behind the scenes look. But the experiment would be that if I release the chapters for free and I'm still producing it, I want to see if people are willing to be generous, $1 a month kind of thing. Like, hey, be a part of this and help other artists. And, maybe there's some kind of tip jar model that maybe it's not going to sustain, like I can't make a living from it, but maybe it'll help. I don't know. I'm willing to experiment because, the whole Mary Sue thing didn't work out for me. I pulled the plug on it early. It just wasn't working for me. There was something about campaigning that made me feel really gross. And anyway, the stars didn't align. So I decided to hold on that one. But I want to do this experiment. And if it works, I might apply it to my other projects and we'll see what happens. So, and now that I'm stuck, everyone's stuck at home, like, well, I'll just work 10 hours a day on the book and I'll just get it out as fast as possible. So that's the plan.
Yeah. Good. Cool. I think that, and so what's the premise of the book itself? I know I've seen some of the stills you shared, some of the art you shared on Twitter, and it looks great.
Thanks. The story, let's see. The main character is a guy named Sebastian. It's sort of like a Jane Austen-ish England, but it's not England exactly. It's not Earth exactly. It's kind of fantasy-ish. He comes home from a war where all the men are off at war, and it's only like old men and kids and women back home because it's like an all-out kind of war thing.
But it's not the Napoleonic Wars.
No, it's just a general, like when I read the Jane Austen books, all the men are off to war. They're talking about the war, and it could be China, India, it could be anything.
Right.
But they come back with all these riches and they have these giant homesteads and all this stuff. But he is one of the only men who has come back because we explore this in the first issue, is he was dismissed without honor, and he was left to find his own way back home, and he has to inherit his parents' estate. And he's living back home. He's one of the only men of a fighting age, let's say. And turns out there's a monster ravaging the town where he left. And as the story progresses, it's like, okay, so this monster's causing all kinds of trouble, kidnapping children, eating them, and stuff like that sort of thing. And he's just trying to get his life back together. And unfortunately, he's one of the only guys who would be able to do something about it. So he relies on his martial experience to, I don't want to spoil too much, but
yeah, no, I like that. So the title, Bad Dreams, right? Yes. Is that relating to like his experiences, or is that relating to the monsters, or is that a yet to be revealed thing?
I can tell you, I don't know how you guys feel about spoilers, but I don't mind telling you a couple of things that's spoiler-ish. So,
well, for those of you guys in the audience, if you guys don't want to hear spoilers about Bad Dreams, plug your ears and yammer, or you can tune out and check the replay in a couple months. It's up to you.
I'm very sorry. I won't say exactly what it means, but it has multiple meanings. So say the main character, one of the things that caused him to have to get dismissed without honor is that he heard atrocities going on while he was at the front, let's say. Mm-hmm. He was a member of the military police, and he was ordered not to interfere. But he would hear all these terrible things going on at night, and he couldn't do anything about it. He wasn't allowed to. So he wasn't allowed to sleep. So for him, the bad dreams went away when he disobeyed and interfered and saved somebody. But the consequence was he was kicked out of the military. And then there are other characters who have nightmares. So for instance, he meets a nice, pretty lady, whatever, and they have a romantic relationship, but she has terrible nightmares because the monster ate her husband, and she saw it happen. So she sees it, and it's like, oh, it's coming for it. It's coming for me. And then there's all these other characters who are also having, like, they can't sleep because they're afraid of this monster kind of thing. So the idea is just this cycle of how can you face the thing that's keeping you from sleeping. That's the theme of the story. Mm-hmm. Every character has something tormenting them that has to be resolved, let's say. So you got the 4 issues, and there you go.
Yeah.
Nice little story.
Yeah, no, I think that's a I think that's a heck of a thing, frankly. It sounds a lot of moving parts, but it also leaves a lot of room to explore kind of those themes.
Yeah.
I think the Edwardian period that Jane Austen's novels are set in is a really interesting historical period. If you look at what's going on in France, look what was going on in Europe, look what was going on in England and in America, all at the same time. There's a whole lot of moving parts that we don't even think about so much. What was going on in North Africa at the time, fascinating stuff. I've never been able to make my way through a Jane Austen novel, which might be shameful.
No.
But I really like the history of it. Well, so here's the story of me and Jane Austen. I will just tell you the thing. When I was in college, and I only went to a year because I didn't do great and I lost my scholarship, and that meant I didn't have the money to continue. But when I was in college, we had a second semester. I had an English class, and we were reading Jane Austen's Emma. And at the time where I was in life, I had zero interest in reading about some rich chick who wanted to set other people up in relationships. That was the least appealing thing I had ever heard of. And so I made it 5 pages in, and I'm like, I'm not reading this book. I don't care what it does to my grade. And it was for a 9 o'clock class, and every morning that they had a quiz over the reading. But 9 o'clock was really early for me, so I was often 10 minutes late, which meant I got zeros on those quizzes, and that tanked my grade. I mean, I did good on other stuff. I got a C on my report, which wouldn't have killed my GPA, except that I got zeros on all those quizzes. So yeah, I killed my scholarship from one class.
It's Jane Austen's fault. And
it's my fault. But
Emma is a pretty dry book. I don't actually like that one very much.
Yeah, I mean I watched I've watched a couple versions of Pride and Prejudice. I think that's a really great story. So I wouldn't have minded. I don't think I'd have minded if that was the one we'd read, but it was Emma, and I just couldn't muscle through it. Yeah. And I was like, I want to read about knights and superheroes and spacemen. I don't have any interest. I already wanted to write comics. That's something I'd want to do since I was little. So I or news stories about the human condition. I wasn't interested in reading Emma. And but so I can't speak to the quality of Austen's writing because I couldn't make it through, which is a weakness, I'm willing to admit.
No, the writing is really hard. I'm actually listening to the audiobooks right now, and it's a lot easier to digest. But the movies, for instance, like the Ang Lee version of Sense and Sensibility, was a good gateway drug for me. Yeah. Once I knew the story, I was able to follow the novels.
Well, and Sense and Sensibility is a great story.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I like the characters a lot.
Well, and it's like, okay, so Sense and Sensibility is one of those stories that, and like I said, I know it from movies. I don't know it from the reading, but it's like Much Ado About Nothing, right? Where it is about the difference between men and women, and about how that is both a good thing and a bad thing. And so it's something that needs the discipline of commitment to make sense of our conflicting motives, both men and women, that we need each other to make sense of the world. And if we push that out of balance either way, we have internal chaos. And I'd also that's a big part of that, and I dig it, and I appreciate that theme more now at the backside of a 20-year marriage than I could possibly have understood when I was 19.
That makes sense. Yeah. My guess is, do you play RPGs at all?
A little bit, yeah.
It seems that lately they're looking for people to be able to do every class, every role, a little bit of everything. Whereas traditionally, it's all about everybody picks a role and we all support each other in our unique roles.
Yeah, yeah.
But the game is not fun if you have a character that can do everything.
No.
So
that's a really good way to look at it, George. I like that.
I was thinking about that because of Ray. in Star Wars, and how the original trilogy was like this perfectly balanced little, you got a rogue, you got a wizard, you know, all that stuff. But then Rey can do everything, and there's no drama, there's no tension, there's no teamwork. So that's not fun to read, and it doesn't really impart a good story. So what you said with Sense and Sensibility is great. Like, here are these lonely characters. Although a lot of modern people don't like Jane Austen for that exact reason. These characters who need each other are looking for a spouse, and it's about them overcoming their own inhibitions and personality quirks.
Well, that's one of those. That's one of those ideas in postmodernism, right?
Yeah,
is that we have this. You can't have people that are incomplete people, because of course I can be perfect and happy within myself, because the only truth I need is my truth. So how the idea that I need somebody else to complete me totally is anti to the core of the of that postmodernist concept that, you know, I can be complete within myself because I am my own rule. I am my own defining of what good is, because only my definition matters to me. And and you know, the Sense and Sensibility specifically, and you know, the Taming of the Shrew, and you know, whatever works you want going back to that, these pre-modern stories acknowledge, even modernist stories acknowledge, that there is no completion within one person, that we are one part of a greater humanity. And even if you boil that down to the fundamentals of human society, to the tribe, to the family, you still need mom and dad for things to work really, really well.
I would guess, and I'm you know, partially sleeping right now, so I'm like part high. But if the postmodernism has a religion that's informal, they're looking for their version of the Messiah, which is this whole perfect person who is marginalized in every way but capable in every way, and we can all be that singular person, the one. We're looking for the, you know, Neo or something.
Man. That's an interesting idea.
But they don't have this written down. It's just, it's inherent in postmodernism. It's, I can interpret anything by just looking at it. So I am the creator and the person interpreting creation and turning reality into whatever I want it to be. So their religion that's not been written down is to empower the individual to rewrite reality as they see fit. But of course, that's not reality. Reality exists without whether or not we perceive it. So what there is
something profoundly Luciferian about that concept, George.
Well, isn't that, and that's, I guess that's a whole other conversation, but like,
it is.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it is.
How very old that idea is. And yet at the same time, they think they're being modern about it, where just by knocking over everything on the table, yeah, the table's clean, but that doesn't mean there's a mess underneath there. Anyway, I'm so sorry. That's
an interesting play. I think we'll probably want to go ahead and wrap stuff up pretty quick, but that is an interesting food for thought.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's pretty cool. So but George, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks.
I am going to go ahead and cut it off there, just because I know you're tired and it's already been past. It's late.
It's time.
It's been a good time, man.
Yeah,
it's been except for 15 minutes. This has been one of the best shows I've had.
Hey.
Well, Doug was a little late. He got his time zones mixed around and thought for a second I was in Pacific time, and he had an hour to get here. But it was negative 15 minutes. So that's what happened there. But it's okay.
He's always fun to talk to.
Oh man, it's great. Well, I was able to fill time talking about what I've been doing in the quarantine. When we're not officially quarantined, I just took a couple of vacation days.
Yeah.
But
that's a good
because
idea.
I just didn't want to work this week. It was St. Patrick's Day. I was going to take a day off anyway. I decided to take 2, and we have a blizzard on today, so it works out. Anyway, right. George, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a great conversation, all through the 3 hours with 3 great guests. 6-scale combat. Napalm Brothers is funding for 9 more days. You guys out there in internet land, go check it out. I definitely think it's worth the $10 they're asking for it. Give Gravestone Press a little love. Give 6th a little support on that. George is here himself. You can check out his Patreon. It's not in the description, but it will be.
Oh, thanks.
So we'll do that.
You can find it through my Twitter. It's easy.
There you go. There you go. And Bigfoot Bill 2 is funding on Indiegogo. It has all sorts of good stuff. And while we're talking about it, I did mention earlier that I just finished reading Earthworm Jim. And I'm going to bring it out here. Just look at this book.
Hey,
See all that gleaming, glossing, foily action with the gold spine. This is the kind of book that Doug puts out. Just full of, it's a giant comic full of amazing colors, great art. Catherine Garner did the colors on this, and just wonderful stuff. I'm going to be doing a review sometime this weekend on that. It's going to be a reboxing because my unboxing got messed up, so I'm going to put everything back in the box after my review. So it's going to be a reboxing. It's going to be great.
nice.
But yeah, that's the thing. It's really fun. Next week on the show, Tim, I think Morris is his last name, and I don't think that's a secret. Behind Column is going to be coming on. We're going to be talking about war comics and politics. It's going to be fun. And hopefully Draken will be coming on as well to talk about his new comic, and I can't remember its name, but it's about delivery men of the apocalypse, I think. But it's like postal carrier hero stuff. It's going to be fun.
Timely.
Yeah. I don't think it's like Fallout, the Postman kind of apocalypse. I think their delivery men are staving off the end of time or something. I'm not sure exactly all the premise on it. I've just looked at some of the stuff on it, so I'm not the expert. So come back next week to get the real answer. Although he did say that he is having internet problems, and so there is a possibility he may have to bow out next week, and then I don't know what we'll do. But that's the plan. Week after that, we're taking off because I'm 42, and then I will be. And then the week after that, Tim Lim, Matt Krotz, Matt Johnson, and probably Doug Ernst are coming on to talk about Christianity and faith in comics historically, how they have been portrayed and how they should be portrayed across multiple platforms. So that is what I've got coming on there. And Twitless is also going to be on that channel. He's the writer for Super School, the webcomic. So that's the next coming up there. And of course, if you like the stuff that I do here on YouTube, you might like my comics. Check us out at idealcomics.net and feel free to support our Patreon because I have no shame and you should give me money for it.
There's nothing shameful. What is wrong with you guys? Why does everyone think Patreon's bad? It's awesome.
Well, I had actually, the Metal was mentioning, I think it was him, was mentioning earlier that Subscribestar actually has a tip button that you can install. So I may have to look at them as well. My only problem is I'm so bad about remembering to update my Patreon on stuff that I should let Pope Fire on to talk Starfire. Maybe if Draken bails next week, I can have you on Pope Fire. She just showed up, so but yeah, she did show up too late. But there's maybe next week. DM me. You've got my deets, Pope Fire. Anyway, but yeah. So this is a great conversation. I just have fun having it. George, again, thanks for coming on. And all you guys in the chat that stuck around, thanks for having it. And tell your friends that the Mattriarchy is the place for the best conversations on the internet. Even if it's not true, do me a solid, right?
The important thing is to have the good conversations and the people will come.
I'm just teasing. That's the kind of thing I think is funny. So anyway, later, guys.
Peace.
Bye. Gotta hit the other button.